It was supposed to be an easy 8-day-long mission. 2 NASA astronauts couldn't even imagine they would get stranded in space for at least 9 months. Their task was to test a brand new spacecraft, Starliner. They were hoping to return it to Earth as soon as possible so engineers could check it out and send it on a new flight. But from the very start, it didn't go as planned for Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams, experienced astronauts who had both been to the International Space Station before. They were supposed to depart on the 6th of May, 2024, but had to postpone departure for 1 month because of a leaky valve in the upper stage of their rocket. When they finally took off on the 5th of June, new problems started before they even got to the station. There were failures in some of their thrusters and, later, leaks in the gaseous helium. It's important because it keeps the thrusters pressurized. Boeing, who built the new spacecraft, and NASA focused on solving those problems and figured out it wasn't safe for the astronauts to fly back home on the Starliner. They didn't just leave them on the ISS, of course. NASA came up with a plan where Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams would come back home on a SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft. It took off in September of the same year with 2 empty seats out of a total of 4. The only problem is that it wasn't supposed to come back until February 2025 at the earliest. In a press conference from the International Space Station, Wilmore and Williams admitted it was heartbreaking to watch their spacecraft depart without them, but they were trained to expect the unexpected. They keep receiving messages of support from Earth, and they aren't at all sad to spend more time in space, as they say it's their happy place. Mr. Wilmore gets up every day at 4:30 in the morning, and Miss Williams at 6:30. They do at least 2 hours of exercise at the space gym every day to reduce the loss of bone density. Another big problem is sleeping in space. The space station has 6 tiny sleep pods, each about the size of a phone booth. Inside, there's a sleeping bag, a little storage area for snacks and personal stuff, and even 2 laptops attached to the walls with bungee cords. The pods aren't completely soundproof, so astronauts sometimes wear headphones to listen to music or calming sounds from Earth to help them fall asleep. But here's the problem. There are more astronauts than sleep pods, so 3 astronauts have to find other places to sleep. One of them sleeps in a simple backup sleep chamber inside the European Space Agency's Columbus lab. Butch Wilmore is roughing it in just a sleeping bag inside the Japanese Space Agency's lab. When they planned this mission, Butch was only supposed to sleep like that for 8 days, which didn't sound that terrible. Another problem they had to deal with was that they didn't pack enough clothes for several months. So, astronauts had to savor what they brought for the first 2 months until a resupply vehicle delivered fresh outfits, along with hardware, fruits, and vegetables. The astronauts have a super packed schedule that's managed by a computer tablet. It tells them what tasks to do, when to take breaks, and even when to eat, all in 15-minute chunks. A little red line on the tablet moves through the day in real time, showing them if they're on track or running behind. At first, Butch and Williams were working on the Starliner spacecraft, testing all its systems like communications, life support, and power. Once they finished that checklist, they started helping the other crew members with science experiments and maintenance tasks. The best-case scenario is now a late March return, and if it actually happens, the Starliner crew will spend over 270 days in space. An average mission on the ISS lasts around 6 months, so it's already way longer, but not close to the record time. The current American record belongs to astronaut Frank Rubio, who stayed in space for 371 days in a row. He lived on the International Space Station from September 2022 to September 2023. When Frank first went to space, the plan was for him to stay there for about 6 months, but it didn't go as planned. In December 2022, a meteoroid, or maybe a piece of broken satellite junk, crashed into the spaceship that was supposed to bring him and his 2 crewmates home. The spaceship was damaged so badly that it wasn't safe to use anymore. The two astronauts who were on that spaceship also had to stay on the ISS with Frank for 6 extra months until another spaceship went to space and rescued them. During his mission, Frank Rubio zoomed around Earth about 5,936 times. Altogether, he traveled a distance of 157 million miles. It's like going to the moon and back 328 times. Frank also went on 3 spacewalks and spent 21 hours outside the space station. One of Frank's big jobs was to do scientific experiments. He studied how bacteria behave in space, where there's no gravity pulling things down like on Earth. But his favorite experiment was taking care of a tiny tomato plant and watching it grow. Frank admitted that being away from his family for so long was really hard, but it's not the only possible hardship on such an extended space stay. Space agencies have entire departments that study the effects of space on the human body. In one of the studies, called Twins, scientists compared 2 identical twin brothers, Scott Kelly and Mark Kelly. They're both astronauts, but for this study, Scott spent a year on the ISS and Mark stayed on Earth. By comparing them, scientists could figure out how space changed Scott's body compared to his twin. He said it took him at least 6 months to feel like his usual self again after coming back to Earth. Scientists noticed predictable weight loss and bone mass loss, but they didn't expect to see changes in his DNA. They found that his telomeres, which are like tiny protective caps at the ends of DNA strands, got longer while he was in space. But sometime after he got back, he had more short telomeres than before. It looks like the damage was permanent. It must have to do with radiation, which is one of the biggest dangers for astronauts who stay in space for a long time. It can damage DNA, and that can increase the risk of some really serious health problems. Astronauts need protection from radiation, not just while they're flying in space, but also if they live on the moon or Mars someday. Scientists are working hard to find ways to keep astronauts safe from this invisible danger. Every space agency has rules about how much radiation astronauts can safely handle during their careers. Another big problem astronauts face is bone demineralization. It happens because there's no gravity in space pulling on their bones like there is on Earth. Without that pressure, their bones start losing minerals like calcium, which makes them weaker. Astronauts can lose about 1 to 1.5% of their bone density every month they're in space. When calcium from the bones gets into the body's waste system, it can lead to kidney stones. Because of these changes, astronauts coming back from space need time to recover. Another challenge in space is how the body's fluids, like blood, behave. On Earth, gravity keeps most fluids lower in your body, but in space, they float upward. This extra fluid in the head can push on the eyes, which might change how astronauts see. Some even develop a condition that can make it hard to focus their eyes, and sometimes the changes in vision can be permanent. When astronauts who spend a longer time in space, like Williams and Wilmore, return to Earth, doctors keep a close eye on their health with regular checkups. Scientists expect that their condition is going to be like that of 6-month astronauts.
Two pictures are rapidly changing in front of your eyes: our huge planet and a black void. The picture of Earth is getting smaller by the second. You're flying away from the spaceship into an endless vacuum and don't know what to do next. The International Space Station flies 250 miles above Earth's surface. A spacewalk is routine for astronauts who work there. Astronauts have spent more than 11,000 hours in the black abyss to this day. Fortunately, during all this time, no one has ever flown away into outer space without coming back, as we've seen in the movies. But unfortunately, astronauts face other, no less terrible, dangers during spacewalks. One such accident happened in 1966. Eugene Cernan put on a jetpack and went into outer space to carry out some repair work. The jetpack, which helps an astronaut control flight in zero gravity, heated up a lot. Eugene put on special protective pants made of metal to protect himself from this heat. The pants protection didn't work when he went into outer space. Instead of directing the heat away from his body, the pants began to heat up. The suit was heavy and uncomfortable, like a knight's armor. It rubbed his skin and restricted movement. Working in zero gravity is physically very hard, but Eugene also had to deal with his whole suit heating up that day. Inside the spacesuit, he felt like he was in a hot bath. High temperatures and hard work caused overexertion, dehydration, and severe weight loss. His face was sweating, and drops of sweat blinded him. During this spacewalk, the astronaut lost about 13 pounds of weight. Other astronauts came to the rescue and took him back to his spacecraft. To reduce overheating, they sprayed him with cold water from a hose. In a sense, to go out into an infinitely huge open space, an astronaut must put on a suit resembling a body cage. Another dangerous incident happened in 1973. Two astronauts, Pete Conrad and Joe Kerwin, went into outer space to repair a solar wing on the Skylab space station. The wing didn't turn around, and the astronauts tried moving it manually. Using force, they turned the stuck wing, but it pushed them. The push was so strong that it threw both astronauts aside. They didn't have time to grab onto a nearby surface and began to fly away into outer space. Fortunately, they had safety cables that didn't let the astronauts go away for good. By grasping them, the astronauts returned to safety. In an ordinary modern spacesuit, there are more than 10 protective layers. Such a suit protects against extreme cold and hot temperatures. It's tear-resistant and doesn't leak moisture from the outside. This protection is necessary to prevent depressurization. If a small passage appears between your body and space, then all the oxygen will start coming out of the spacesuit. The more oxygen the suit loses, the more vacuum it gets. This leads to terrible consequences, such as suffocation and increased body volume. It looks as if you start to inflate from the inside. In 2007, Rick Mastracchio went into outer space to do some repair work. For some reason, there was a hole in his left glove next to his thumb. It was on the outer layer of the glove. But the worst thing was that the astronaut hadn't noticed it. He continued to work as if nothing had happened. But one damaged layer could destroy the second. The second one could tear the third one, and so on, until the vacuum reached the astronaut's skin. Rick was supposed to work 6 hours in outer space, but during the 4th hour, he noticed the damage in his spacesuit. The astronaut reported this to command and received an urgent order to return to the ship. He never found out how the hole had appeared. Inside the ISS, there are many chemicals necessary for working in space. For example, ammonia has the property of freezing almost any surface. This chemical frost is used to cool some components of the station during overheating. The leakage of this substance on the ISS is practically impossible. This is exactly what astronaut Robert Curbeam heard from experts during the training before his first flight to space. But this accident occurred to him on his first spacewalk in 2001. Robert was working outside the space station when an ammonia leak started. The liquid splattered all over his spacesuit. A thick layer of ice quickly covered the glass. Robert didn't see anything. He feared that he had broken something, but the accident was not his fault. The protective layers of the spacesuit didn't allow Robert to freeze, but the ammonia severely restricted his movements. The main problem was that he couldn't return to the ship. Ammonia could get into the station, and this could lead to an emergency. Robert had to stand in outer space for 1.5 hours and wait for the leak to end. After that, he successfully returned to the station. To realize how difficult work is in outer space, we need to understand what a spacesuit is. It weighs 280 pounds, which is as much as a scooter. You won't feel its weight in zero gravity, but it will still make you sweat. Astronaut Chris Hadfield had described it by saying that every movement inside your spacesuit meets resistance. The suit scratches your skin, squeezes your bones and joints, and forces you to spend twice as much energy on simple movements. In such conditions, you start sweating and your eyes get wet. This moisture flies inside the helmet and blinds you until it evaporates. But if there's too much moisture, it can threaten the life of an astronaut. Such a case happened in 2013 with astronaut Luca Parmitano. He went into space to measure something outside the station. At one point, he felt that the back of his head was wet. He informed the others about it and got an order to return to the station. When Luca was coming back, he had to turn upside down. As soon as he did this, water gushed into his helmet. It covered most of his face. Luca couldn't see or hear. He tried to report the trouble to base, but the water covered his mouth. Fortunately, his partners rescued him and helped him return to the station. When they opened the helmet, almost half a gallon of water poured out. Astronauts' cables are some of the most reliable defenses against floating away into space. But what if one broke from a strong push, or because the astronaut didn't fix it well? For additional protection, there's a backpack called Safer, Simplified Aid for EVA Rescue. It's like a jetpack. It releases gas from small tubes and changes the direction of your flight. If you're spinning in space, Safer stops and aligns your movements. You can take manual control and fly using a special joystick. Safer was first used in 1994, but before engineers created it, there was the MMU, the Manned Maneuvering Unit. In 1984, astronaut Bruce McCandless used it for the first time. You may have seen this famous photo where he floats in outer space without a cable. The problem was that Bruce was the first tester of such a jetpack. He wasn't 100% sure if it would work. He went into outer space and unhooked the cable from himself. There was nothing else to keep him from flying into the infinite black abyss, and his team wouldn't be able to save him. Imagine how scary it must have been. Fortunately, the jetpack worked. However, after 3 missions, NASA decided to stop using the MMU as it was unsafe. After that, engineers invented Safer. Jetpacks and cables are reliable safety systems, but the best protection for an astronaut in space is their skills. Each astronaut has 6 years of higher education and several more years of training. They spend many hours training in virtual reality with spacewalk simulations. They train their body, endurance, and mind, since the main thing in a dangerous situation in space is not to panic and stay calm.
On August 20th, 1977, the most ambitious space mission took off from Earth. The main goal of Voyager 2 was to study the outer solar system up close. It became possible because of a rare alignment of planets. Voyager 2 was supposed to study all the gas giants of the solar system: Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Astronomers also hoped it would be able to find and explore the edge of the solar system. Since Voyager 2 was built for interstellar travel, the probe was equipped with a large 12-foot wide antenna. It allowed the spaceship to send the data it gathered back to Earth. During its journey, the space probe discovered a 14th moon of Jupiter. Voyager 2 was the only spaceship to study all 4 giant planets from up close. It was the first human-made object to fly past Uranus, where it found 2 new rings and 10 new moons. Voyager 2 also flew by Neptune and noticed its great dark spot. That's a colossal spinning storm in the planet's southern hemisphere. The storm is the size of Earth and moves at a speed of 1,500 miles per hour. These winds are the strongest ever recorded on any planet of the solar system. In the history of space exploration, only 5 spacecraft have managed to leave the gravitational pull of the solar system. Those were Pioneer 10 and 11, Voyager 1 and 2, and New Horizons. People launch thousands of objects into space. These objects easily overcome Earth's gravity. but the Sun is around 300,000 times as massive as our home planet. That's why its gravitational pull is way more difficult to fight. Even more impressively, Voyager 2 is the second human-made object in history to reach the space between stars after passing through the heliosphere. That's a bubble of magnetic fields and particles produced by the Sun and protecting the solar system. 2 years after its launch, Voyager 2 started transmitting the first images of Jupiter. The space probe provided scientists with much-needed information about Io and Europa, some of the largest of Jupiter's moons. Then the space mission passed by the gas giant itself. The distance between the spacecraft and the planet was around 400,000 miles. That's when the probe noticed some changes in the shape and color of the Great Red Spot. It's an enormous, long-lived storm system, like a hurricane on Earth, but much, much larger. 2 years later, Voyager 2 reached Saturn. It discovered spokes and kinks in some of the planet's rings. While the spacecraft was flying behind and up past the gas giant, it passed through the plane of Saturn's rings. At that time, Voyager's speed was around 8 miles per second. For several minutes, the probe was hit by thousands of micron-sized grains of dust. This kept shifting the probe's direction, and its control jets had to fire many times to stabilize the vehicle. After Voyager 2 explored Uranus and Neptune, it headed out of the solar system. Its instruments were put in low power to save energy. In August 2007, the spacecraft passed the terminal shock. It's the boundary marking the outer limit of the Sun's influence. Here, the solar wind slows down. In the summer of 2013, the probe reached interstellar space. Now, when it comes to sending and receiving signals in space, there are 3 factors you should keep in mind: distance, power, and time. The farther away a spacecraft is, the farther a signal has to travel before it reaches it, and the longer it takes for this signal to catch up with the spacecraft. And when it finally gets there, it's extremely weak. Another problem is that once the spacecraft is launched, it can't be upgraded. It's literally stuck with the technology it was outfitted with. Plus, such spaceships as Voyager 2 are powered by radioactive fuel. When special material radioactively decays, it releases heat that gets converted into electricity. Unfortunately, the more material decays away, the less power the spacecraft has for receiving and transmitting radio signals. Despite this issue, we haven't lost the connection with Voyager 1 and 2. That's because new and more powerful technologies appear on Earth. Signals people send can reach much farther than before. That's why it was possible to stay in touch with Voyager 2, which entered interstellar space in 2018 and has already traveled almost 12 billion miles away from Earth. But in March 2020, the main piece of equipment that allowed scientists to exchange signals with the spaceship was switched off. After the communication with the spacecraft stopped, NASA spent around 11 months upgrading its deep space network and installing new hardware. The DSN is an international array of huge radio antennas that help astronomers on Earth communicate with interplanetary missions. These antennas are located in California, Madrid, and Canberra. The one used to keep in touch with Voyager 2 is a 230-foot wide dish in Canberra. This is the only equipment that can send commands that can reach the probe. This antenna, known as DSS-43, started operating in 1972, 5 years before Voyager 2 and 1 were launched. At that time, it was only 210 feet across. Since then, the dish has received a lot of repairs and upgrades, but these 11 months were the longest the antenna was offline. In October 2020, the antenna was finally ready for a trial after all the upgrades and repairs. The mission operators sent a set of commands to Voyager 2, and after many months of radio silence, the spacecraft returned the signal. The probe confirmed it had heard the call. After that, the spacecraft carried out the commands. While the dish was offline, the mission operators could actually receive scientific data and health updates from Voyager 2. Astronomers kept getting data from interstellar space, the region outside the Sun's heliosphere, but they couldn't send any commands to the probe since it had traveled too far away from Earth. The upgraded antenna received 2 new radio transmitters, and it was done just in time. One of the transmitters, that was used to communicate with Voyager 2, hadn't been replaced in almost 50 years. The antenna also got new cooling and heating equipment and other electronics necessary to support the advanced transmitters. Now, a curious thing about the Deep Space Network is that its radio antennas are positioned in a very precise way. They're spaced equally around the globe. This way, almost any spacecraft can stay in touch with at least one facility at all times. But Voyager 2 is an exception. In 1989, it made a close flyby of Triton, Neptune's moon. It was the only close encounter people had with the eighth planet of the solar system and its moon. By the way, Triton is the largest known object that is believed to be born in the Kuiper Belt. That's a donut-shaped ring around the Sun full of icy objects. Voyager 2 discovered Neptune's ring system and its tiny inner moons. The probe also gathered a lot of amazing information about Triton. For example, it became clear that the moon is covered in cryovolcanoes. Instead of spewing molten rock, these volcanoes spit ice consisting of water, ammonia, and methane. When the New Horizons spacecraft flew past Pluto more than 25 years later, it discovered the same phenomenon on the dwarf planet. Anyway, to make this detour, Voyager 2 had to travel over the gas giant's North Pole. But this changed the probe's trajectory, deflecting it southward relative to the planes of the planets. Since then, Voyager 2 has been moving in that direction. And now, the spacecraft is so far away that it's out of reach of the radio antennas in the Northern Hemisphere, those in Madrid and California. This makes DSS-43, which is located in the Southern Hemisphere, the only dish powerful enough in broadcasting just the right frequency to send commands to Voyager 2. Voyager 1, the probe's faster-traveling twin, didn't change its trajectory. After passing by Saturn, it took a different path. That's why now it can easily communicate with the two facilities in the Northern Hemisphere. The upgrade the Canberra Deep Space Communication Complex has gone through can also benefit other space missions. For example, the Mars Perseverance rover that landed on the Red Planet on February 18, 2021. The dish will also be crucial for exploring other planets and the Moon. For decades now, people have been dreaming of exploring space. And since the year 2000, there has indeed been a continuous presence of people in space. And recently, a new record has been set. Just a couple of weeks ago, there were 17 people from 5 different countries in Earth's orbit at the same time. The previous record was set in September 2021 during the privately funded Inspiration 4 mission. At that time, the number of people in orbit reached 14. So let's see. Just recently, 3 more people have arrived at China's Tiangong space station. There were 3 more astronauts aboard the same station, but they've been there since November 2022 and are supposed to return back to Earth in June. Then there are 7 people on board the International Space Station, and 4 more departed the ISS aboard SpaceX's Crew Dragon named Freedom. They successfully returned to Earth on the 30th of May 2023, leaving 13 people in orbit. Interestingly, the current record also includes the 600th person to get into Earth's orbit. Specialist Rayana Barnai from AX-2 mission became a space traveler number 600, as well as the first Saudi woman in space. But I've got something even more exciting to tell you. Oh my! The record for most people in space, and just not in Earth's orbit, was reset not so long ago too. But it lasted for a mere 5 minutes or so. But during this short period of time, there were 20 people off the planet. This record was set when 6 members of the Virgin Galactic Unity 25 Spaceship Two crew happened to be in space at the same time as 3 Chinese taikonauts living and working aboard Tiangong and 11 astronauts on board the International Space Station. Now that's getting crowded. Well, the International Space Station has always hosted the majority of space travelers from Earth. But I bet there are some cool facts about this marvel of technological development you haven't heard yet. The ISS is the 3rd brightest object in the night sky, and the coolest thing? You can sign up for a special service and you'll get a text every time the ISS travels over your location and is visible with the unaided eye. I've seen it dozens of times myself, and it's very, very cool. Normally, you can see it between dusk and dawn, but be ready because the station is very fast. It moves at a speed of 5 miles per second and circles our planet every 90 minutes. The International Space Station is a true record breaker. It's the largest human-made object in space. It's 357 feet long from end to end, which is about the same length as a soccer field. It also weighs about 450 tons. 8 spacecraft can dock at the ISS at the same time. The working and living space of the station is bigger than a 6-bedroom house. Astronauts have 6 sleeping quarters, a gym, 2 bathrooms, and a beautiful 360-degree view from their special bay window. Now to the nitty-gritty. On the ISS, you wouldn't have to deal with lots of disgusting smells. There is a specially trained person who smells everything astronauts take with them in space. It's done to protect them from unpleasant odors. The thing is that you can't really air the room out there if you don't like how it smells inside. That's why NASA is very careful about what kinds of smells are allowed to pass through. You'd also have to get rid of your clothes instead of washing them after each use. To bring a mere 1 pound of load to the International Space Station costs up to $10,000. That's why it's easier to throw your clothes away when they get dirty than to waste water washing them. Now, while sleeping, you'd have exceptionally good airflow around you. Otherwise, the carbon dioxide you'd exhale would form a bubble around your head and you get oxygen deprived, and that's not good. Now, people often think that in space you experience zero gravity, hence the weightlessness astronauts feel on the International Space Station. But that's not exactly true. Gravity is one of the most important forces that exist in the universe. Thanks to it, the Moon can orbit Earth and the Sun doesn't float away from our home Milky Way galaxy. But astronauts on the ISS experience not full-fledged but microgravity, which means itsy-bitsy gravity. Earth's gravity on the space station is not only around 10 to 12% weaker than the gravity on the planet's surface, but astronauts are constantly in free fall. The spacecraft, the people inside, and all the objects aboard keep falling forward, not down, but around our planet, following a specific orbit. And since they're all falling together, the crew and the stuff inside seem to be floating. But our space exploration plans are much more ambitious than just orbiting our planet on board the ISS. We're planning to send a mission to the Moon and build a colony on Mars. Some experts claim that in the next 25 years, around 20,000 people are likely to leave Earth. But how many people would it take to colonize an entire star system? In 2002, anthropologist John Moore from the University of Florida stated that a spaceship with 150 passengers could leave Earth and set off on a several thousand years journey to another star system. And upon arrival, the descendants of the original crew could build settlements in a new world. That seems like a lot of work to me. Let's continue. The nearest star system, Proxima Centauri, is 4.2 light-years away from our home planet. Talking about space, it's just next door. But for us, it's so far that we would need to build a generational spaceship to get us there. But the question is how many people you'd need to send on such a mission to have enough genetic diversity. A new study disagrees with John Moore, claiming it must be way more than 150 people. According to a scientist from Portland State University, a spaceship traveling to such a distant world would have to carry at least 10,000 people. This number might secure the success of the mission. 40,000 people would be even better. Who knows what could happen to the travelers during such a challenging and unprecedented journey? At the moment, NASA isn't ready to send humans even to Mars, let alone a distant solar system. But a few private organizations are working on this project. They hope to make interstellar trips possible in the next century. They count on a huge increase in propulsion speed, which could potentially reduce the travel time between stars to a mere few hundred years. Researchers have built several simulations to figure out how many various scenarios could play out during such an interstellar mission, and they have come to the conclusion that the success of this mission would greatly depend on the size of the starting population. Genetic diversity would keep the travelers healthy. The larger the population is, the more diversity it has. And 150 people is definitely not enough to maintain genetic variations. Even a population of 500 people wouldn't be sufficient enough. At the same time, if we sent to another solar system 40,000 people, we'd be able to maintain 100% of the variation. Even 10,000 travelers would make the scenario relatively stable, which means that any number between 10 and 40,000 people would be a pretty safe bet. But of course, we wouldn't be able to send so many people in space in just one spaceship. We'd have to build many and spread people among them. These ships could be modular, able to dock together for trade and some social gatherings. For the genetic variety, I'm guessing. But they would travel separately, so that if some disaster struck one of them, the rest would remain unharmed. But to make interstellar travel possible, researchers and engineers will have to overcome loads of obstacles. We still need to increase propulsion speed, deal with the negative health effects of living in space, and invent self-sustaining systems providing air, water, and food. Or we could just decide to fix our own planet and stay home.
NASA sent a spacecraft right into the Sun. It's the fastest human-made object ever, and could cover the distance from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C. in just 1 second. The Parker Solar Probe's mission is to study our star's dangerous behavior. Scientists warn that massive solar storms are inevitable, and the consequences could be catastrophic for our planet. The spacecraft got 7 times closer to the Sun than any other probe ever did. It managed to do so during its 20-second flyby to the star since its launch in 2018. Because our star is so massive, its gravity is really strong, like a giant magnet. As the probe flies around the Sun, it uses gravity to go faster and faster and eventually picks up that crazy speed. As it got closer and closer to the Sun's corona, which is its outer atmosphere, the probe had to survive temperatures of 2,552 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot enough to melt many metals. It was protected from that heat and radiation by a 4.5-inch thick carbon shield. It kept the tools inside the probe safe and running at around room temperature. The scientists went to all this effort because they're hoping to solve a big mystery about the Sun that's been puzzling them for ages. The surface of our main star is already super hot, but as you move closer out to the corona, the temperature shoots up to millions of degrees. And it doesn't make any sense because it's farther away from the Sun. So maybe we could finally get some answers about this heat phenomenon. The mission is also going to help us understand something called solar wind. The Sun is constantly shooting out tiny bits of energy and charged particles into space, like a never-ending breeze of electricity. When this solar wind hits Earth, it can create amazing light shows in the sky called auroras. The more active the Sun is, the farther south you can see auroras. Our star follows natural cycles that last about 11 years. The activity goes from low to high and back down to low. Right now, we're in the solar maximum, the peak of the activity cycle. That's why we've spotted beautiful auroras in the most unexpected places in 2024. The downside to it is that the Sun's activity can send out bursts of energy and charged particles that can mess up things like radios, satellites, and even GPS. It can be dangerous, especially for astronauts out in space who aren't as protected as we are here on Earth. Humans wouldn't feel the compression of the planet's electromagnetic field because of all the extra radiation, but power grids are really sensitive to it. If we don't act fast, when it happens, the influx of energy will go into power transformers all over the world, disrupt them, and leave big areas without electricity. If this happens during a hurricane or a tornado, when communication is already super important, it could make it much harder for emergency services to communicate and save lives. That's why it's so important to learn to predict this space weather. It's tricky because, unlike most disasters, like earthquakes, floods, and volcanoes, it doesn't leave behind any kind of physical evidence. The only big solar storms we really know about happened in 1859 and 1921. The first one, called the Carrington event, was so wild that it made sparks fly from telegraph wires. The auroras were seen all the way near the equator. Scientists back then were using a special kind of paper that reacted to light to record solar activity. During the Carrington event, the reading from the Sun went off the page, literally. Whatever was happening, it was so extreme that we still don't fully understand it. Then, there was the New York Railroad Storm of 1921. It was powerful enough to knock out telegraph systems across the US, Europe, and the Southern Hemisphere. The storm boosted radio transmissions for a bit, making them travel farther than usual. But back then, there weren't nearly as many radios, so it wasn't super helpful. The bigger problem was the electrical grid in the US, which was heavily damaged. Back in 1859 and 1921, people weren't as dependent on tech as we are now. If a storm like that hits today, the consequences could be way more catastrophic. Scientists from New Zealand who study space weather are working on simulations trying to prevent disasters from happening. They say one of the possible options to do it is to study other suns like ours elsewhere in space. If we get data from thousands of stars, not just one, the picture for analysis would be more complete. So far, scientists have launched or plan to launch several other missions in addition to the Parker Solar Probe. Meanwhile, NASA is working on another mission, launching Endurance, robotic moon machinery on steroids. Its main mission will be to collect samples from key lunar locations that will later be retrieved by astronauts from the Artemis program. These samples are spread across the largest impact basin on the Moon, separated by hundreds of miles. To do it, Endurance will have to be way more advanced than Perseverance, NASA's current most cutting-edge rover. Endurance will drive roughly 100 times further, drive 10 times faster, and collect roughly 200 times more sample mass. Endurance would also be the first planetary rover to drive at night. And because it will be on the far side of the Moon with limited communication to Earth and surface data, it will have to drive autonomously between sample locks and make its own decisions in tough conditions. When it reaches its destination, it's going to switch to a more classic way of doing things. Scientists back on Earth will get involved directly, guiding the rover to explore the sites and collect samples. The teams on Earth will also keep an eye on how the rover is doing by monitoring its telemetry, which is the data it sends back, like its health stats. If they spot any signs that a part is wearing out or something isn't working quite right, they'll tweak the plan to keep things running smoothly. All this will cost huge amounts of money, probably way more than the Viper moon mission that was cancelled after NASA had spent around $450 million on it. While Endurance is in the planning stage, the Blue Ghost lunar lander is already on its way to the Moon. Its main mission is research. It will spend 25 days in Earth's orbit, taking measurements and waiting for the right time to fling itself to the Moon. After 4 days in transit, Blue Ghost will hang out in lunar orbit for another 16 days to collect more data. Then it will descend to one of the largest basins on the Moon and spend one lunar day there. It will measure subsurface thermal data, radiation levels, and other important data. At the end of its mission, Blue Ghost will take some final pictures of the lunar sunset. It isn't designed to return back to our planet, so when the night falls, it will do some final work and go offline for good. NASA chose the team of University of Florida aerospace engineers to work on another innovative space project. It will cost $12 million, and its goal will be to improve the way we track changes in tectonic plates and oceans on Earth from space. It will use state-of-the-art sensors that will measure even the tiniest gravitational changes. The data it gets will help scientists monitor droughts, assess groundwater reserves, and better understand changes in sea levels. They expect to launch it around 2027 aboard a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket.
Neil Armstrong had been getting ready for his mission on the Moon for over 3 years. To resist microgravity conditions, he had to learn how to walk sideways by being strapped and suspended at an angle in trying to walk along walls. His limits were tested through an intense diet and sleep regimen, since in space he would only have beef and vegetables, previously dehydrated and stuffed into a package. Back in the day, astronauts had to experience the desert, jungle, open sea, and Arctic survival training. These days it's a lot more structured. But back then, it was more of a let's drop this person in the middle of nowhere with no supplies and see if they make it. Before landing on the Moon, he had to gather and study rock samples in the Grand Canyon, explore ancient volcano formations in the Nevada National Security Site, and look into gas and lava vents, lava lakes, and pit craters in various locations in Hawaii. On July 20th, 1969, Armstrong was given a hearty breakfast before blastoff. Steak, eggs, toast, juice, and coffee. He received what doctors call a low-residue meal, which means he wouldn't have to go to the bathroom soon after. It took him 109 hours and 42 minutes to reach the surface of the moon, in an area called the Sea of Tranquility. He had to travel 240,000 miles to get there. The crew could have gone for the Ocean of Storms or the Central Bay, but this place was chosen for landing because it had good visibility, was relatively smooth, and was easily reachable with as little propellant as possible. When he was at about 500 feet above the surface of the moon, Armstrong had to maneuver the spacecraft manually to make sure they wouldn't land in a dangerous crater. He continued to hover for about a minute and a half, moving it sideways until he felt comfortable to land. As soon as his device landed safely, he immediately radioed to Mission Control, located in Houston, Texas. The now famous message,
"The Eagle has landed."
Steadily, he went down the lunar module's ladder, while a television camera was attached to the craft to record his progress. The camera also transmitted the signal back to Earth, where hundreds of millions of people were anxiously waiting. At precisely 10:56 p.m. EDT on the same day, Armstrong placed his feet onto the lunar soil, saying,
"It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind."
The schedule said that the astronaut needed to sleep before the first moonwalk, but he chose to go outside earlier than planned, since he obviously couldn't sleep. If Armstrong had walked on the moon without special equipment to breathe, he would have smelled a weird odor, sort of musty and sulfuric. Still, he had the chance to smell it when he returned to the lunar module. The thing is, the dirt had clung to his feet, so the odor spread all over the cabin. He described it as wet fireplace ashes, or how the air smells after fireworks shows. Who would have thought you needed to pack a scented candle when going to the moon? Apart from the people that have since made it to the moon, no one ever got the chance to know precisely what the crew was smelling. Even during that first mission, when moon soil and rock samples were transported to labs in airtight containers, once they were opened back on Earth, surprisingly, the smell was gone. He also felt the surface of the moon to be fine and powdery, but said he had no difficulty in moving around. One other member of his crew joined him about 20 minutes later. The whole moonwalk took a little over 2 hours. During this time, Armstrong and his teammates set up various devices on the surface of our satellite. One was meant to precisely measure the exact distance from there to Earth, by timing how long it took for a laser beam to travel from Earth to the lunar surface and back. Another meant to measure moonquakes and potential meteor impacts, which leads us to the discovery that the moon was pretty alive after all. We know today that the largest moonquakes are much weaker than the largest earthquakes, though their movements can last for up to an hour, way longer than on Earth. They managed to gather somewhere around 50 pounds of rock and soil samples. They also snapped many photographs of the terrain, where they also planted a US flag. The astronaut even got the chance to catch up with President Richard Nixon, for less than a minute though. The final thing on the list for Armstrong was to go for a walk to what is now known as East Crater, 65 yards east of the lunar module. It was the greatest distance traveled from the spacecraft on that specific mission, approximately the length of half a football field. As soon as his tasks were done, Armstrong went back into the lunar module and safely closed the hatch to get some sleep. While preparing for liftoff, Armstrong and his crew discovered that, because of their chunky spacesuits, they managed to break the ignition switch for the ascent engine. No big deal, they thought. So they used a part of a pen to push in the circuit breaker to start the launch sequence. At 1:54 p.m., the famous Eagle began to ascend. Apart from the scientific equipment installed on the surface of the moon, a plaque was also left there. It read, "Here, men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969 AD. We came in peace for all mankind. Years later, Armstrong said that NASA limited their time on the moon because they didn't know how the spacesuits would handle the moon's extreme temperatures, as high as 260 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, to as low as 280 degrees Fahrenheit below zero at night. Things got a bit more complicated when Armstrong landed back on Earth, since he had been exposed to unknown space particles. The result? He and his team had to be placed in planetary protection quarantine on their return, as soon as their space capsule safely splashed down in the Pacific Ocean on July 24th. That specific quarantine for the Apollo 11 astronauts is one of the reasons why we have microwaves in our kitchens today. When they first returned from the moon, they initially spent their first few days in a mobile quarantine facility, or MQF. Sure, the MQF featured comfortable chairs, bunks, a toilet, and showers, but it didn't leave a lot of space for fancy cooking. Since there was no room for a standard oven or grill, and to also reduce the potential fires that might have occurred, NASA had to get creative. That's how the original countertop microwave oven was developed, to easily help astronauts get their meals without the hustle of a fully equipped kitchen. These days, you can see that first microwave in a museum in Oakland, California. After returning to Earth, Armstrong claimed he would never reach for the stars again. But he didn't stop exploring, though. Back in 1985, he joined a professional team of other greatest explorers to the North Pole. He was joined by mountaineer Edmund Hillary, aviator Steve Fawcett, and photographer Patrick Morrow, reaching the pole on April 6, 1985. Armstrong claimed he wanted to see what the Earth's icy pole looked like from the ground, since he had only seen it from the surface of the moon. The Apollo 11 mission was nevertheless unforgettable for Armstrong since. In 2015, the Smithsonian Institution uncovered that he had kept hidden a cloth bag full of small parts from the lunar module. It included his waist tether, some utility lights, and their brackets, an emergency wrench, and the optical sight that was mounted above Armstrong's window of the space module. It also contained the data acquisition camera that recorded the iconic footage of Armstrong taking his small step on the moon. Armstrong kept it to himself for many years, until his widow, Carol, eventually found it. He even kept it a secret from his official biographer, who had many times asked if he had kept any memorabilia from his famous mission. He didn't sneak those objects back on Earth, though. He just mentioned it to be a bunch of trash he wanted to bring back.
NASA has some incredible plans for the moon. For example, their next ambitious lunar program, Artemis II. They've set their sights on landing astronauts, including the first woman and the next man, on the moon by 2024. Artemis is all about building a sustainable presence on the moon. They're planning to establish a lunar gateway, a sort of space station in lunar orbit, which will serve as a jumping-off point for lunar landings. And let's not forget about the cool lunar landers. Scientists are developing the mighty Space Launch System rocket, which will launch the Orion spacecraft carrying astronauts towards the moon. Then there's the Human Landing System, a snazzy lunar lander that will gently touch down on the moon's surface, allowing astronauts to explore and conduct amazing scientific experiments. And NASA isn't going alone this time. They're teaming up with international partners, like the European Space Agency, to make this lunar dream a reality. But all these wonderful dreams might be ruined by something that seems super small and insignificant at first. Picture this: no atmosphere, no air to breathe, and suddenly, a mysterious haze and radiant beams of light appear at sunrise and sunset. It's as if the moon is putting on a celestial show. But there is a twist to this beauty. During the Apollo 17 mission in 1972, this beautiful sight made one of the NASA astronauts, Harrison Schmitt, sneeze and made his eyes water. He called it lunar hay fever. This mysterious fever affected all 12 moonwalkers. From sneezing fits to stuffy noses, those astronauts experienced symptoms as if they caught a cold. It took days for the reactions to fade away. This event led to a discovery about lunar dust and its darker side. When scientists found out about these rays, they rolled up their sleeves and delved into their origins. And here's what they discovered. Those radiant bands of light were actually caused by sunlight sneaking through layers of teeny tiny lunar dust. The dust was composed of small particles and sharp glass shards and was lurking everywhere. And it turned out that this lunar dust was a sneaky villain. It brought a whole host of problems. Astronauts who found themselves with impaired vision were just the beginning. The troublemaker went even further, damaging precious machinery and causing electronic malfunctions. It even had the audacity to corrode components and smelled like burnt gunpowder inside the spacecraft. Yikes. It clings to everything, coating surfaces like a mischievous blanket. It can clog up equipment, get into delicate machinery, and even mess with astronauts' spacesuits. In 1972, things got really hairy again. The Apollo 17 astronauts faced a nightmare. After just 22 hours of gallivanting on the lunar surface, their spacesuits suffered irreparable damage. Yes, you heard that right. Irreparable. The dust diminished astronauts' mobility, making it harder for them to move around and perform their moonwalks with grace. And no matter how hard they tried to clean it off, it clung on for dear life, leaving the spacesuits in a sorry state. So, as you can see, it poses some serious challenges for future moon missions. But our intrepid scientists aren't giving up. To solve this problem, they have to understand how lunar dust forms and why it's so darn clingy. They found out that it all begins with meteorite impacts. When these space rocks crash into the moon, they generate a fine dust that fills the air. Sometimes these impacts even cause minerals to melt, forming sharp glass shards that mix with the dust. Talk about a moon makeover. The dust is also filled with silicate, a material commonly found on volcanic planets. Silicate inhalation can cause serious lung problems for Earth's miners, so you can imagine the trouble it can cause on the moon. A recent study found that even a scoop of replica moon dust was toxic enough to destroy up to 90% of lung and brain cells exposed to it. But it gets worse. The low gravity on the moon allows those tiny particles to float around for much longer, penetrating deeper into the lungs. Imagine breathing particles 50 times smaller than a human hair for months. That's a recipe for trouble. And you see, on the moon's surface, things are a bit different than here. There are no rainstorms or strong gusts of wind to blow this dust away. There is also no atmosphere to protect the surface. So without the natural forces of wind and water erosion like we have on Earth, these dry particles stick around persistently. And to make matters more electrifying, the moon is constantly showered by radiation from the sun. This exposure gives the dust an electric charge. The solar winds create positively and negatively charged particles. The particles then buzz around, repelling each other and giving rise to those radiant bands of light that the Apollo 8 astronauts witnessed. It's like a disco party on the moon. ESA, the European Space Agency, has gathered a team of experts to study the lunar dust. They're working with simulated moon dust mined from a volcanic region in Germany to understand its behavior and effects. Engineers also need to find a way to protect future astronauts and equipment. Engineers in NASA want to create spacesuits that can survive not 1, not 10, but a whopping 100 extravehicular activities on the lunar surface. That's like spending 800 hours out there, exploring and having a blast. Besides that, NASA initiated the Breakthrough, Innovative, and Game-Changing Idea Challenge in 2021. It was open to clever university students from all over the world. These young minds put their thinking caps on and unleashed a wave of innovative solutions. For example, they proposed using special fibers that conduct electricity, inspired by fluffy chinchilla hair. Just like how chinchillas stay dust-free, these fibers would help keep the lunar dust at bay. A furry friend lending a helping paw, isn't that adorable? Another bright idea involved an electrically charged brush activated by UV radiation. It's like a magical wand that zaps away the dust with a flick. Abracadabra, lunar dust be gone. And let's not forget the fabric inspired by clever insects. These insects have pollen-collecting structures that repel unwanted dust. So our ingenious students thought, why not mimic that? They designed a fabric with similar properties, creating a shield against the sneaky lunar particles. What's remarkable about these ideas is that they all use the power of charge to fight the dust. They cleverly repel it from the spacesuits, keeping them clean and protected. And even though all these ideas sound pretty great, scientists in NASA unleashed another, Even better solution. Carbon nanotubes. It's a great way to revolutionize spacesuit fabric. What makes these carbon nanotubes so special? Well, they possess some amazing superpowers. First off, they're superconductive, meaning they can carry electricity like nobody's business. It's like having a lightning bolt trapped inside a microscopic tube. Not only that, but these carbon nanotubes are tougher than the toughest meteors. They have the strength to withstand the harsh lunar environment, where even a speck of dust can cause trouble. Imagine having a suit made of a material that's stronger than Superman's cape. So, NASA's scientists decided to weave these extraordinary carbon nanotubes into the spacesuit fabric. The electrodes were carefully integrated into the outer layer of the fabric, making it a force to be reckoned with. But how do they banish the lunar dust? Well, here comes electrifying science again. When activated by a special alternating current, the electrodes create powerful electric fields. These fields work like magnets, repelling both charged and uncharged dust particles away from the spacesuit. Picture this like a dance party, where the dust particles are the uninvited guests, and the electric fields are the bouncers, swiftly escorting them out. Thanks to this technology, lunar dust doesn't stand a chance against our astronauts. Also on the bright side, the lunar soil can be used to make bricks for shelters. It can also help extract oxygen for astronauts to survive on the moon for long periods of time. When life gives you lemons, make a lemonade, right? So, let's cheer on our NASA Dream Team as they embark on this epic lunar quest. Let's hope that they succeed in their findings, and the next moon mission won't be a big problem. Stay tuned.
It's been decades since the last manned moon landing, Apollo 17, which happened in December 1972. Isn't it time we thought about going back to our dusty satellite, and maybe even staying there? NASA has made a promise on this subject. They're preparing to send astronauts on the moon again, perhaps by 2025. This will all happen through a program called Artemis. It's also going to include the first woman ever to experience the lunar surface. Now you might ask, why haven't we done this already? One former NASA administrator said something interesting on the subject. It's not because of scientific or technological issues. Problem was that the potential projects took too long and were just too costly. You see, space travel, especially when it involves humans, isn't easy on the pockets. It's true that, in recent years, NASA had budgets of billions of dollars. Sure sounds like enough money, right? Well, not when you check out their to-do list. That's because they have to consider everything. From telescopes and giant rocket projects to missions also targeting the Sun, Jupiter, Mars, and beyond. When you look at it this way, NASA needs to be very good at budgeting to achieve all those goals. It's not just because of finances, though. The moon itself is quite problematic. It poses real dangers that cannot be taken lightly. For starters, its surface is filled with craters and boulders that aren't easy to land on. Then, there is the moon dust, or regolith, if you'd like to call it by its scientific name. It was created over many years by meteorite impacts. It's extremely harsh and sticks to everything. It can potentially damage spacesuits, vehicles, and systems quite quickly. Also, dealing with the lunar habitat isn't a walk in the park either. The moon has no protective atmosphere. What this means is that for 14 days at a time, the lunar surface is faced with harsh rays from the sun. That period is followed by another 2 weeks of total darkness. All these changes create extreme temperatures, which us humans are not really accustomed to. There are solutions, don't worry. NASA is working on dust and sun-resistant spacesuits and vehicles. They're even developing a system that might supply electricity during those lunar nights. What's even more interesting about this system is it could come in handy on Mars too, once we get there. NASA also needs to draw in really smart people for its projects. Think about it. The average age of the people working for the mission control for Apollo 13 was just 26 years old. And these people had already been part of numerous missions by that time. which means they'd had considerable experience from a very young age. But here's where other individuals can help too. In recent years, it wasn't just NASA who's been working tirelessly to revolutionize space travel. There are many successful people out there with enough resources to join in on these efforts. Some are developing new types of rockets that can land on the moon too. In total, NASA landed 12 people on our satellite. It's definitely one of the most awesome moments in its history, if not the best. And those astronauts did amazing things up there. They brought back rocks, took snapshots, did science experiments, and even left flags behind. These were all important moments of the Apollo missions, but they weren't meant to create a safe place for humans on the moon. Scientists have had this idea of a lunar space station for a long time now. It's only logical. After all, it's just a 3-day trip from Earth. It means we can, technically, afford to make little mistakes here and there, without messing up the whole project. Plus, we'd learn so much before venturing even further into space. A moon base could provide fuel for deep space missions. We could also build telescopes up there, and launch them way easier in space. It could also help us in another important project. Figure out how to make Mars habitable too. Not to mention, a lunar space station would help us learn more about the moon's origin. Who knows, it could even bring in some money because of all that fun, exciting lunar tourism. Either way, the Apollo moon program took a lot of work. For starters, let's look at the sheer number of people involved. Around 400,000, from every corner of the states. Not everything was picture perfect, tough. There were two main unfortunate events. Firstly, a fire mishap at the launch pad of Apollo 1. Secondly, an oxygen tank decided to throw a tantrum on Apollo 13, causing severe issues mid-mission. An important part of the project was Saturn V. It is to this day the most powerful rocket flown successfully, being 36 stories high. Still finding it hard to picture? This rocket stood twice as tall as Niagara Falls. Thanks to Saturn V, NASA successfully completed 13 missions. This included chauffeuring 24 astronauts towards the moon, with half of them even having a little walk on its surface. The existing rockets and space shuttles can't go beyond low Earth orbit. In simpler terms, they can't reach the moon with all the gadgets astronauts need to thrive. Current space vehicles are just not capable of carrying that load, at least not since the Apollo missions happened. Regardless, we did make a lot of progress on Earth and are ready to send astronauts to our satellite pretty soon. Here's where the Artemis project comes in. It's a program overseen by NASA. And to make sure it all goes well, NASA previously launched Orion, a spacecraft with no crew on board to orbit the moon and return to Earth. Think of it as an automated test drive. Before we actually send people out there again, we need to make sure all the devices work properly. One day, Orion will be the vehicle that will take astronauts to the moon again. It features a launch abort system to keep astronauts safe in case something bad happens during launch. It also has a service module, which is the powerhouse that fuels and propels Orion and keeps astronauts alive with water, oxygen, power, and temperature control. All these future projects make one wonder, what will life on the moon be like anyway? We can only use our imagination for now. Some say we'll be living in homes straight out of a fairy tale, something like a cozy hobbit hole. Living underground on the moon might be a must. That's due to the scorching temperatures and the lack of oxygen. If you add meteorite threats and the non-stop radiation, it's no wonder we can't just walk on its surface. What about transportation? Big and small companies alike are trying to create the ideal moon ride. If current estimations are current, One type of moon taxi will take off as soon as 2024. Unlike our current rockets, these space taxis won't have to deal with the harsh conditions of re-entering Earth's atmosphere. It will be easier for them to make multiple round trips. To support our lunar living, we'll need to have a special area for space taxis to safely take off and land. Think of it as a landing pad on a firm, flat stretch of moon surface, protected by walls to shield against moon dust. Moving around on the moon's surface will be made easier too. The next generation vehicles we're talking about will have their own controlled environment, which means you won't need a spacesuit while inside. Should feel like stepping out of your space ride for a bit. Then of course, you'll need to put on your spacesuit. All right. So we've got our homes and our rides sorted. But what about fuel? That's where the moon throws us a lifeline. The moon's lighter gravity means we don't need as much power to escape its pull. Plus, the moon has ice, and that's super handy. We might be able to convert this ice into rocket fuel. We'll need dedicated space gadgets to help gather this ice. One such tool is called Trident. It's like a drill, perfect for digging into the icy moon surface. Additional robotic helpers would then turn this ice into fuel and deliver it to a space gas station. If this works, rockets on their way to Mars could stop by for a quick fuel top-up before continuing their journey.
Perhaps we've all stopped to think at one point about what it would be like to live on another planet. I know I've had days like that. Gotta get away. And maybe even interact with other types of creatures that already live somewhere else in space. These days, such ideas sound more like something from a science fiction book. But in the future, permanently changing your address to another planet might turn out to be mandatory. Think of the stars in our solar system as a battery. Billions of years from now, its energy will be gone. Without its light and warmth, life on Earth can't exist. When you think about it this way, we have to hope that future humans will have found some other place to live by then. Thankfully, there's good news. Recently, scientists at NASA have announced that they have found a new planet that might be able to support life. They call it TOI 700e. E is roughly the same size as Earth, and it's located in a region of space where scientists think water could exist in its liquid form, which is crucial for the development of life. This planet is not the only one, though. Close to it, there's another promising planet which they call TOI 700d, but this one is further away from its star. Because of the distance from the main source of light, Planet D lies in a special area called the Conservative Habitable Zone. In simple terms, scientists aren't sure whether life might exist on this one, but they don't exclude such a possibility. Planet E is in the optimistic zone, which means that it's possible that it has water and even an atmosphere. Hey, at least we have some options. The two planets are in a solar system that's only 100 light-years away from Earth, which is considered pretty close in space terms. NASA found these planets by watching the light from the star and measuring how it moves when a planet passes in front of the star. This is the first time that NASA has found a solar system with multiple planets that could have life. So far, scientists have found over 5,000 exoplanets, and they think there could be at least 10,000 more. Specialists at NASA are looking into the ways to figure out if any of these planets could harbor life. But they also say we might find forms of life we don't expect to see, and that we should be open to other possibilities. That's because we only know about what life can be by looking at our own planet. Sure, everything sounds enticing so far, but don't pack your bags just yet. As appealing as these new planets might sound, there's still one problem: getting there. Scientists have been researching for decades how people can stay in space and thrive for long periods of time. And history tells us it's no easy project. Back in 1962, John Glenn became the first American to orbit our planet. To circle Earth a mere 3 times, he had to go through months of technical and physical preparations. These days, advanced technologies help us investigate Mars better, and scientists have figured out that there is water and materials on the red planet that may be useful to people. It has sparked the idea of sending people to Mars to live there, just to begin with. The first manned Mars mission is scheduled for the late 2030s or early 2040s, if everything goes well. The plan is for this to be a round trip, but even if NASA manages to plan everything well, the round-trip journey will still take about 500 days. It all depends on Mars and Earth's positions in their orbits around the Sun. One of the biggest problems with living on Mars is gravity. For starters, the astronauts will arrive at the red planet after months of living in microgravity. It means it could take them a lot of time to physically get in shape before they could start exploring. That's because living in microgravity conditions heavily affects the human body. It might mean loss of bone and muscle mass, as well as a shift in the normal movement of body fluids, which tend to go upward. This can lead to pressure on the eyes and even problems with people's eyesight. But Mars is right here, in our own solar system. What about planets that are light years away? The answer is still up for debate. It may sound cool to travel really fast, like at the speed of light. So far, scientists believe it's not possible. Sure, we may have been able to create airplanes that travel faster than sound, supersonic aircraft, but it's not the same. There's quite a difference, actually. Light is about 1 million times faster than sound. Traveling at the speed of light would mean we could go from Earth to the Moon in 1 second, or from Los Angeles to New York in less than the blink of an eye. But what stops us, though? Some say it's energy. It may be possible to make something go really fast, but it'll take a whole lot of energy. In this case, engineers will need to find new ways to make things move in space. Right now, rockets use fuel that is similar to the gasoline you use in your car. But that's not very efficient when it comes to space travel. Other ways to push a spacecraft include using electric or magnetic forces. One promising idea is using a solar sail, which is like a large thin sheet of plastic that can be pushed through space by sunlight. Some spacecraft have already used solar sails, and scientists think they could go up to about 10% of the speed of light. If other planets in our solar system turn out to be inhospitable, and we can't invent spaceships that move fast enough, we might still have a choice. Secret Option C. It was first proposed by a scientist who wrote an interesting study about a special type of planet. It suggests that we might not need spaceships to move around and escape problems on our own planet. We could use planets that are not orbiting a star. They're called rogue planets. Ooh. Instead of gravitating toward a star, these lonesome space objects simply drift alone through space, doing their own thing. Think about it this way. Moving to Mars is like moving to an already furnished house. Regardless of how nice it would be, you would still have to adapt to it. You'd have to get used to how much light gets in through the windows every day, and to climbing up and down the stairs to get to the living room. Moving to a rogue planet means we'd start from scratch, building our own house from the ground up, perfectly adapted to our needs. Free-floating planets are usually seen as cold, dark, and not suitable for life. But if they have underground resources, they can be useful. They offer a constant surface gravity, a lot of space, and resources. They can also provide water and protection from space radiation. If we become an advanced enough civilization, we might be able to control the planet and even create new types of energy. So the next question would be where we could find such a rogue planet. It's hard to know how many of these there are in the universe, but scientists have found a bunch of them in one region of the Milky Way galaxy. Some rogue planets have been kicked out of their own solar systems because they were bad. No, not really. It was because of gravity, while others might have formed on their own. Either way, we don't want rogue planets to get too close either, at least not in the near future. The chances of a rogue planet entering our solar system are extremely low. But if it did, it could mess things up for us. Depending on its size, a rogue space object might divert other planets off of their course around the Sun, which could alter their exposure to light and warmth. And if it crashes into the Earth, well then, that would be a bad thing too.
The profession of an astronaut is probably one of the most intriguing and mysterious out there. But have you ever wondered about the details of their everyday life? Like what's going on under those bulky spacesuits? I mean, some people seriously believe that astronauts wear paper underwear. Others are sure that a lack of gravity allows the grime to just float away. If only. The thing is, astronauts don't do laundry at all. In 2011, NASA commissioned a washing machine for the International Space Station. Was it a joke? In any case, astronauts couldn't use it for apparent reasons. Delivering water to the ISS just to do laundry sounds outrageous and super costly. So, astronauts can only dream of freshly laundered linens and other stuff. Instead, fresh clothes get delivered to the station from Earth just like any other supplies. Unfortunately, it happens not that often since the price of launching literally anything into space is exorbitant. So, astronauts have to wear their clothes for way longer than they would otherwise do on Earth. The only thing that makes this situation a bit better is that astronauts tend to lose some of their sense of smell in space. When interviewed, some astronauts admitted wearing, for example, the same pair of shorts for months and only changing their underwear once every 3 or 4 days. It's probably not surprising that astronauts dress not to impress, but for comfort and convenience. Their typical attire usually consists of short-sleeved shirts and long cargo pants. Those are regular clothes we wear on Earth, nothing special. But when they leave the climate-controlled insides of the ISS, of course, they need special clothes. By that, I mean those very chunky spacesuits. They protect astronauts from insane temperature swings ranging from 250 degrees Fahrenheit in the sun to minus 250 degrees in the shade. But even with all this protection and cooling tubes wicking away body heat, spacewalks tend to cause astronauts to work up a sweat. Wearing an EVA, which stands for extravehicular activities, can mean hours of hard work. And don't forget that astronauts often wear layers to stay warm and pressurized. And these layers include an inner form-fitting item of clothing that resembles long underwear. This item is often reworn and even shared. And since there are no washing machines on the ISS, you get the point, right? An interesting fact. There is a specially trained person who smells every single thing that astronauts take with them into space. It's done to protect them from unpleasant or toxic odors. The thing is that you can't really air the room out there in space if you don't like how it smells inside. That's why NASA is very careful about what kind of odors can pass through. At the same time, nothing can prevent the smells that appear already on the ISS. Anyway, spacesuits and what's underneath them are used again and again, and soon you start worrying not only about bad smells, but also about hygiene and health problems. An alarming possibility of biocontamination arises. It includes bacteria, body fluids, and other foreign substances. It gets worse if we think about longer missions, for instance, to the moon. At the same time, it's totally impractical to wash spacesuit interiors on a consistent basis. Water is too valuable on the ISS to waste it on something so mundane. That's why NASA, along with the European Space Agency and other organizations, asked specialists to develop fabrics that could solve the problem of biocontamination in suits. You see, during the shuttle program conducted by NASA, spacesuits were supposed to be used on quite short 2-week trips. But then, astronauts started living on the ISS for much longer periods of time. That's why the spacesuit's lifespan had to be extended up to 6 years. No wonder microbes became a much more worrying issue than before. So more than a decade ago, a team of experts began to research different methods of getting rid of microbes and bacteria dwelling in spacesuits. They cut textiles in 2-inch squares and put them in petri dishes and grew a few species of fungi and bacteria on these samples. Some of the fabrics they used were infused with copper. This substance has impressive antimicrobial properties. When bacteria touch this element, their cell walls and membranes get destabilized. The metal's ions damage microbes, making them more vulnerable. NASA scientists also tried using textiles treated with silicone and silver. The latter turned out to be as toxic to germs on contact as copper. After observing the stuff that had grown on the fabrics for the past 14 days, the researchers discovered that only one compound had managed to keep bacteria and fungi at bay. It was a solution of silver molecules normally used for disinfecting hospital dressings and other stuff. But the ions of this metal turned out to be too good at their job because they got rid of everything, literally. And total sterility could do more harm than good. We need a balanced ecosystem consisting of millions of microorganisms to keep our organs and skin healthy. In 2022, NASA hired U.S. companies Axiom Space and Collins Aerospace to develop the next generation of spacesuits. And soon, a prototype suit appeared. It was designed to be used during the Artemis 3 mission. The main goal of this voyage is to land a crew at the south pole of our natural satellite. These spacesuits are supposed to use textiles with antimicrobial properties that can potentially reduce biocontamination. The cooling system of these suits will also add biocides in its water loops, which will help prevent microbial buildup. Now let's talk about spacesuits in more detail. To begin with, there are actually two main types of spacesuits. You've probably seen the Advanced Crew Escape Suit, aka the orange suit, aka the pumpkin suit. Astronauts wear this full-pressure suit during takeoff, or rather liftoff, since we're talking about a spaceship. These suits are irreplaceable for those who are heading for super high altitudes. There, the pressure is so low that people can't survive without a special protective suit. And while air crews wear partial pressure suits, space crews have to be protected by full pressure suits. After all, they travel way, way higher. The suit is also equipped with lots of things that can help an astronaut survive emergencies during a spaceship launch or landing. A regular pumpkin suit is stocked with flares, medications, survival gear, a radio, and a parachute. So, in short, astronauts couldn't live through the process of leaving Earth without the orange suit. But why did its designers choose this hue? The main reason for picking the orange color is that this hue is one of the most visible for search and rescue, including very probable sea rescue. As for EVAs, their purpose is different. Astronauts wear these suits when they set off on spacewalks. It can protect them from the severe conditions of outer space, with its extreme temperatures and near vacuum. Plus, the spacesuit can prevent small debris from hurting space travelers. You've probably noticed that EVA suits are much bulkier than the orange ones. That's because they have many layers of insulation and heavy protective fabric. They also contain breathable air, drinkable water, and temperature controls. Now, every time an astronaut goes on a spacewalk, they use a tether that ties them to the space station. And in case the tether breaks, the EVA suit has a backup system. This system includes small jet thrusters which can be controlled from the station with the help of a joystick. As for the color, first of all, white reflects the heat of the sun better than other colors, and astronauts don't get too hot. Plus, the white color is the best when it comes to spotting the tiny dot of an astronaut against the vast expanse of black space. Another curious detail. While white spacesuits protect astronauts from getting too hot, they can't prevent them from getting too cold. And that's when special gloves come into play. They have special heaters which keep astronauts' fingers cozy and functioning.
It seems like NASA and China are each planning to send humans to Mars. Both space agencies have tentative plans to launch the first crewed missions by 2033, right when Mars and Earth are playing a game of tag. And that's not all. Other missions may happen in 2035, 2037, and beyond. The ultimate goal is to build a Mars habitat for future exploration and research. So, how are they going to do that? Well, let's find out. Now, traveling to Mars isn't as easy as hopping on a rocket. The distance between our planets can change a lot over time, ranging from around 35 million miles to 250 million miles. And even with our best technology, it takes 6 to 9 months just to get to the red planet. So, a round trip to Mars could mean spending 3 years away from Earth, dealing with extra radiation and floating around in microgravity. But NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory has some exciting news. Scientists have been working tirelessly to design a minimal architecture mission to Mars. They're thinking that 2033 is the perfect year to make it happen. So here's the deal. Every 15 years, the rocky planets, Venus, Mars, and Earth, align just right to create a cosmic sweet spot. The mission will make the most of this rare alignment and perform an epic gravity assist maneuver using Venus. It's like getting a boost from a planetary slingshot. We'll speed up our spacecraft and reduce the need for making our own propulsion. The report also talked about some really cool ideas, like using nuclear power for spacecraft engines and using Martian resources to make things. These technologies could make space travel faster, protect astronauts from radiation, and make it easier to live in space. They might even let us make resources and fuel right on Mars. So, this is how the plan goes down. First, we'll launch a spacecraft towards Mars. It'll spend around 30 days in high orbit, exploring and gathering valuable data. Then, it's going to head back to Earth, also swinging by Venus for a quick visit. So, this whole adventure will last approximately 570 days, which is just 1.6 years. And a shorter adventure means less exposure to radiation. Now keep in mind, this mission will focus on orbiting Mars rather than landing on its surface. It's just a stepping stone, paving the way for future landing missions. Just like Apollo 8 mission orbited the Moon before Apollo 11's historic landing. Landing on Mars by 2033 might be a bit too ambitious due to funding constraints, but who knows? If all goes smoothly, it could become a reality. Now for the coolest part. We don't need fancy new technologies or vehicles for all this. We'll make use of existing ones that are already in production or being studied for the Artemis Moon program. Now let's break down our Mars mission vehicle, a big puzzle of many parts. And guess what? It was put together by a community of space enthusiasts back in 2017. That's right, it wasn't the scientists who produced it first. But now, this isn't just some fantastic idea anymore. Most of these things are already becoming a reality, being made or planned by NASA. So let's take a look at this concept. First, we have the Orion spacecraft. This is the spaceship that will take the crew to the orbit around Earth and bring them safely back home. It's like a super fancy space taxi, and it might be the most powerful taxi to ever exist. It's combined with 3 powerful propulsion stages, and we're also using a special fuel that doesn't need to be ultra-cold like in the movies. Next, there's the Earth departure stage. This is an important part of the mission. It helps us make a powerful thrust that sends us on our way to Mars. Then, we have Mars Transit Habitat. This is where the crew will live and hang out during their journey to Mars. Like a cozy space house with all the things they need to be comfortable. And finally, the Mars Orbit Insertion Stage. When we reach Mars, this awesome thing will help us slow down and enter its orbit smoothly. It's our maneuvering expert. Even the Mars Transit Habitat is being developed and might even be tested in a few years. That means we're on track to have the whole thing ready for our amazing Mars mission by 2033. In other words, it's all about working with what we've got and making it happen. Now, let's talk about the plan's timeline. Mid-2028, the action begins. First, we'll need to do a couple of test flights. We'll send 2 stages ahead of time to make sure we can come back to Earth safely. These stages will join together like 2 spaceships becoming best buddies. They'll orbit the red planet and then come home. To do all that, we'll use powerful rockets and 13 commercial launches. It's going to be a huge space party. Late 2032. After all that, we launched the fully assembled Mars mission vehicle to high Earth orbit. So far, this is an empty vehicle that awaits astronauts. If all is good, then it'll be ready for the final check. March 2033. Time for our brave crew and their Orion spacecraft to join the party. We launch them and they dock with the Mars mission vehicle in Earth's orbit. They'll make sure the whole lot is just right before we head to Mars. Flexibility is important, so we can adjust our plans if needed. April 2033. Everyone's ready for the adventure. We perform a powerful burn, like a big push that sends us on our way to Mars. The crew will travel for about 200 days. November 2033. Finally, the crew reaches the red planet. Once they're in Mars orbit, they'll spend about 30 days exploring and doing awesome space stuff. Mars will be our playground. When it's time to return home, they'll say goodbye to the stage that helped them get into Mars orbit. Then their vehicle will meet up with the 2 stages we sent ahead. Remember these space buddies? And after that, it will take us about 340 days for the crew to come back to Earth. This is where we'll use the gravity of Venus to slingshot around the Sun. To keep the equipment and crew at the right temperature, we'll have a sunshade that will protect us from the Sun's heat since we'll be really close to it. In the end, Orion will re-enter Earth's atmosphere and splash down in the water. What a heroic ending! And this would be just the beginning. Our awesome team has another plan for the bravest adventurers out there. It's called the Conjunction-class long-stay mission. It launches in April 2033 and lasts a long time, 950 days. That's more than 2.5 years, with 550 days spent in Mars orbit. It requires fewer launches from Earth, but has some different challenges, like spending more time in microgravity and dealing with increased radiation. So we'll need some real space heroes for this one. But of course, there are some major hurdles to overcome before we can make all this happen. Experts closely looked at NASA's Journey to Mars program and found that the plan needs some serious changes. There are a few high-risk areas, like life support systems for long missions, using solar power for propulsion, making oxygen on Mars, and so on. They're also worried about timelines, funding, and many other things. So, according to them, sticking to a deadline of 2033 might be impossible with the current plans and budgets. Even aiming for 2035 carries significant risks and possible delays. But hey, space exploration has never been easy, right? With realistic determination, anything is possible. Most likely, the idea of sending people to Mars will be realized before 2040. NASA is working on finishing the plan and details to make this possible. So, even though we still have some tough nuts to crack before we can make it a reality, the dream of sending humans to Mars is exciting. It's a thrilling adventure full of challenges, discoveries, and the spirit of human exploration. So, let's show the universe what we're made of. And that would be mostly carbon.
People are shouting and waving their hands in the auction room. The presenter can't calm everyone down because the lot on the table is the most expensive dirt in the world. Its price is about $9 billion, but it's really hard to imagine its real value. Because it's dirt from Mars. It's so expensive because it's going to take 1 decade, billions of dollars, and 3 space missions to deliver the dirt here to Earth. And we've already started the first mission. On July 30th, 2020, a single-use Atlas V rocket was launched from Earth's surface towards Mars. The cost of launching such a rocket is about $109 million. The rocket carried the Perseverance rover and Ingenuity drone. The flight took about 7 months. On February 18th, 2021, the rocket finally reached its destination. The landing module carrying the rover and drone was launched into the atmosphere of Mars. The robotic heroes traveled inside a capsule faster than the speed of sound. Underneath, the capsule was protected by a heat shield to keep its valuable cargo from burning due to high temperatures. It was time for the team at NASA's Mission Control Center to clench their fists in hope that the landing would go smoothly. The entire process was automatic. Once the cargo capsule entered the atmosphere of Mars, a parachute successfully opened. This reduced the speed of the capsule to 1,400 feet per second. As soon as its drop speed went down to subsonic, the heat shield was dropped. At this point, people saw the surface of Mars for the first time with the help of the camera and radar placed inside the capsule. The capsule was already moving at speeds comparable to that of a supercar on a racetrack. The drop speed went down to 475 feet per second at an altitude of 6 miles above the surface. That's how high planes on Earth fly. At an altitude of about 2 miles, the 8 jet engines of the landing module started. The navigation system adjusted the landing trajectory. The landing module then separated from the parachute capsule and began its independent descent at a speed of 245 feet per second. Everyone at NASA's Mission Control Center was waiting for a successful landing. 1,000 feet above the surface, the rate of the descent is 100 feet per second. At about 65 feet above the surface, the sky crane system began lowering the rover to the surface. The Perseverance released its 6 wheels like an airplane releases its landing gear. The wheels of the rover were getting closer and closer to the surface. A few more feet, and touchdown. At the same moment, the Perseverance cut the cables of the sky crane. The entire team on Earth erupted with joy. In the next second, the rover also cut the cables connecting it to the landing module. It flew off and made its own uncontrolled landing. In other words, it crashed into the surface of the red planet. The second step of the mission that's supposed to deliver the most expensive dirt in history to Earth began with collecting samples. This phase actually started long ago on Earth. The rover carries 43 titanium tubes. Each of them can hold a soil sample the size of a human pinky. While preparing these tubes in a laboratory on Earth, scientists first blew some air through the tubes. Then they bathed them in tubs with acetone and other chemicals to make sure no bacteria remained inside. Then they were placed in an oven, heated up to 300 degrees Fahrenheit for 29 hours. When Perseverance collects samples in these tubes, they can be stored there for at least 10 years. By comparison, lunar soil samples put in sealed boxes could only be stored for 10 days. Perseverance also has a lot of equipment and spectrometers to research samples. It even has a powerful laser. The rover can melt solid rocks into plasma and then analyze their composition. Scientists hope to find traces of living organisms in these soil samples. That's exactly why Perseverance landed in Jezero Crater. This crater is as wide as the Great Salt Lake and was once filled with water. You can see dry riverbeds and clay deposits there. This makes scientists believe that once there was water in that region. And since water is the basis of all life, researchers hope to find traces of its existence here. Another goal of Perseverance is to test the technology that will make it possible to produce oxygen on Mars. People would need it for breathing and as rocket fuel. To do this, the rover uses MOXIE, which stands for the Mars Oxygen In Situ Resource Utilization Experiment. This is a box the size of a hamster cage that weighs as much as a large dog. Its purpose is to pressurize Martian air so that it resembles that on Earth and then heat it up. A chemical reaction with a special metal inside the box is supposed to break one atom of oxygen from carbon dioxide. As a result, we'll have carbon monoxide in pure oxygen. If this technology proves successful, it'll be scaled 200 times. This way, we'll produce enough oxygen for astronauts to breathe and for rockets to be launched back to Earth. So the $2.7 million rover, this price includes its design cost, construction, and maintenance, will be collecting dirt and rock samples until 2023. It'll leave closed tubes with samples right on the surface of Mars, and almost a decade later, they'll be collected. People will need another rover to do that. A new mission will take several $1 billion to build. Then it'll need 7 months to reach Mars. After that, there will be another complicated landing. It'll be a simple rover with big wheels. Those wheels will help it get around Martian hills. Large solar panels will power it with electricity. This rover will gather all the samples collected by Perseverance. Then, it'll load them into a case the size of a basketball and carry it toward the rocket that will land on Mars together with it. The next step will be to deliver the findings to Earth. The rocket with the soil and rock samples will have to take off from Mars and get into its orbit. Another spacecraft will be waiting for it there. The rocket will launch the sample case, and the spacecraft will catch it. This spacecraft will then start its engines and head back to Earth. Upon arrival, the spacecraft will drop an entry vehicle. It's basically a capsule protected by heat shields with the sample case inside. When the capsule enters Earth's atmosphere, it'll get very hot because of friction with the air, but the shields will protect the samples, and the capsule will land somewhere in Utah. The whole mission to deliver the samples will last about 5 years. Only after that, the samples will be ready for research, and people will finally find out if there's been life on Mars. Was it before the birth of Earth, around 4 billion years ago? Or was it before humans became an intelligent species? Scientists hope to find the answers to these questions. That's why these samples are actually worth a lot more than $9 billion. What if Mars indeed turned out to be a potentially habitable place, and people could build a colony there? Then it'd be a few more decades of work before we could get to the Red Planet. To do this, people would have to use many dozens of rockets. First, an empty spacecraft would be sent into orbit with the help of a launch rocket. Then another rocket would deliver cargo to this spacecraft, and people would need one more rocket to refuel the spacecraft. Only then, a 7-month trip to Mars would begin. The spacecraft would have to deliver enough research equipment, building materials, and other supplies to Mars. Then we'd need to organize energy production. We could use nuclear power plants or solar panels for this. Houses for people would most likely be located underground. Mars's atmosphere doesn't have much protection from solar radiation, so people would have to hide from the sun. The next tasks would be fuel and oxygen production. Moxie could help us with this. And of course, food farming. People would grow food in airtight greenhouses right on Martian soil. But we'd still have to wear spacesuits there. To feel at home, people would have to terraform Mars. We'd have to heat the planet and create an atmosphere similar to that on Earth. The pressure on Mars right now only allows water to be in a frozen state. We'd have to make it liquid. Scientists offer many ways to do this. One of them is making a huge meteorite crash into Mars. But whatever method it is, it'd still take many dozens or even hundreds of years before we could call Mars our new home.
On November 2nd, 2000, the first crew of astronauts arrived at the International Space Station. Almost 25 years have passed, and the ISS still remains one of the most outstanding projects created by humanity. During all this time, 280 astronauts from 23 countries have visited the station. This place has become a floating laboratory for space research where people from all over the world come together to explore our universe. The station remains a source of inspiration for writers and movie directors. This is not only one of the most important parts of the scientific field of humankind, but also an important attribute of pop culture. The station makes one circle around Earth every 90 minutes, and very soon, one of its next circles will become the last one. NASA is going to destroy the ISS. Space and science fiction fans may feel sad at this moment, but there are good reasons for such a difficult decision. The ISS, like any physical object, is not eternal, especially in the conditions of outer space. Yes, there's no oxygen, atmosphere, oxidation of materials, and air pressure, but the ISS is moving at an altitude of about 260 miles above the Earth's surface at a speed of 17,900 miles per hour, which is almost 20 times faster than the speed of sound. Also, the space around the planet is filled with debris consisting of broken satellites. And don't forget about stardust and tiny pieces of meteorites. What if something crashes into the station and blows it to pieces? Yeah, NASA is tracking the largest pieces of debris, but there are more and more of them every year. Under such conditions, the station can't serve us forever. The parts are wearing out, and the station fasteners are becoming weaker and require frequent repairs. The station was supposed to only last 15 years, but it will eventually last twice as long. In 2030, astronauts will leave the ISS, and then it will be destroyed. But how can this be done, given the size of this object? It weighs 430 tons and is the size of a football field. It is the largest object after the Moon that flies around our planet. People made 42 launches into space to construct this gigantic structure. given its size and close location to Earth, destroying the station is a big risk. Just imagine it disintegrating into hundreds and thousands of fragments and falling to the surface of our planet. Yes, some of these chunks will burn up in the atmosphere, others will fall into the water, but some large parts can fall on cities. It will be a devastating meteor shower. This option is too dangerous, but this is exactly what NASA is about to do. The disposal of the station will probably be a more complex operation than its creation. Of course, scientists have considered other options besides the destruction. For example, we could return all the astronauts to Earth and then send the station to a higher orbit so that it would fly there forever. However, such an operation would be too expensive. In addition, changing the orbit might not save the station from collapsing. We definitely don't need a huge piece of metal that could fall apart at any moment over our heads. That's why destroying the station is the only option. To destroy the station, scientists plan to send it to a lower Earth orbit, then carry it through the atmosphere, where some parts of the station will burn, and after that, submerge the station in a remote part of the ocean, where ships don't sail and fish don't swim. By the way, this place is called Point Nemo, and it's located in the South Pacific Ocean. This is the farthest point from land. For many years, people have been dumping space debris and failed satellites there. It's considered one of the most lifeless and loneliest places on Earth. NASA plans to drop the ISS there, but this requires very precise calculations and control. The operation can't be fulfilled without a special space tug, and this unique machine will be invented by Elon Musk's SpaceX company. Musk signed an $845 million contract with NASA. According to it, the station should be safely destroyed by 2031. And that's how this cinematic operation is going to happen. The device that will lower the ISS to Earth will be built according to the design of the SpaceX Dragon ship capsule. Scientists plan to calculate the details of the station's flight trajectory, all angles of incidence, and the speed of movement. No mistake can be made, as any miscalculation will lead to disaster. Our planet is a giant object with a powerful gravitational force that attracts other objects to itself. The ISS uses thrusters to resist this attraction and stay at the same height. So, first of all, the station will need to reduce its resistance. If necessary, it can use the engines to adjust the route. From an altitude of 260 miles, the station will descend into an orbit of 205 miles above Earth. After that, SpaceX will launch its space tug. All this will happen about a year before the scheduled date of destruction. During this time, the astronauts will fold up scientific equipment, say goodbye to the station, and return home. This sad moment will be recorded on camera and posted on the internet. After that, the whole planet will watch the dramatic finale of the ISS. The space tug will dock with the station and transport it to the lowest point of the orbit, approximately 90 miles above the surface. There, the station will experience huge air resistance. It will become increasingly difficult to control the fall. The tug must be equipped with powerful rocket engines to correct the flight. Scientists will control the shuttle, calculating the trajectory of the fall. Then, SpaceX's device will begin to push the station down. The giant space object will pass through the thickest and most dangerous layers of the atmosphere. It will burn down the station, which will be falling apart by that time. This will be a mesmerizing fire show. Some parts will burn up in the air, others will pass through the barrier. At high speed, incandescent parts will collide with the surface of the Pacific Ocean. Millions of people will be watching the last flight of the space legend on the screens of their gadgets and TVs. The water will be getting closer, and boom! Pieces of those stations will crash into the water with a deafening noise. Many smaller fragments will fall nearby. The entire station will cool down quickly and sink to the ocean floor. Mission completed. But the history of the station won't be over. Point Nemo is 2,700 miles away from the nearest land in any direction. But the best way to get to it is from Easter Island, Chile. What if Rich people from all over the world flew to Chile to then travel to Point Nemo. Just imagine, covering thousands of miles just to get to the ISS crash site. People will descend in bathyscaphs to the ocean floor and take out the wreckage of the station. Someone might start selling them. Someone will keep them at home as part of a collection. Perhaps NASA will retrieve some modules of the station to put them in a museum. But what will happen once scientists finally get rid of the ISS? The space laboratory is used for research in outer space. After its destruction, research will continue, but on a grander scale. Humanity has to explore Mars, remember? For such an important mission, it's necessary to prepare astronauts in conditions close to those on the Red Planet. The Moon is the perfect place. NASA is conducting the Artemis mission. We'll explore the lunar surface, and we will go on a long journey to Mars from there. At the end of 2022, NASA launched a probe that flew beyond the Moon. The next flight will be launched with people on board. The third flight will be the first human outing on the Moon since 1972. Gradually, step by step, the agency plans to land several astronauts and space station modules on the surface of the Moon. They will build large research bases where they will prepare for the first ever human flight to Mars. By the way, would you agree to go on a dangerous journey to the Red Planet? Write your answers in the comments.
Always follow your dreams. Never give up. Don't think about what others will say. Just do it. These motivational phrases can sometimes mislead you, especially if you suddenly decide to become an astronaut. Yes, if you have dreamed about it since you were young and have done everything to get into this profession, you have a great chance. But what if you're a lawyer or study history at some university and suddenly decide to quit all this and go into space? How likely is this? Let's find out. So, to become an astronaut, you need to apply through NASA or any other space agency. Let's focus on NASA for now. At the first stage, you need to have a tertiary education. You must have a bachelor's degree in mathematics, engineering, or science. Not all at once, but the more degrees you have, the better. Additionally, you need to have 2 years of experience in your profession. You won't be able to join NASA right after the graduation party at the university. Okay, you've finished your studies and obtained the profession of a space engineer. You have worked at a rocket construction plant for 2 years and finally sent your application to NASA. But this doesn't guarantee anything. The agency looks at your experience and professional skills. However, you're not the only one. There can be more than 10,000 applicants. The next step is a medical examination. And here, you may encounter an unsolvable problem, such as your body size not fitting the set parameters. You're a potential spaceship passenger, and you will also need to wear a spacesuit in outer space. If you're too tall or short, you won't be able to sit comfortably in the pilot's seat or wear the spacesuit properly. But don't worry, the range of acceptable parameters is extensive. Furthermore, you should have excellent eyesight. The good news is that you can wear glasses or undergo surgery to improve your vision. It's not a problem. Of course, you should be in good physical shape, have no bad habits, and maintain a balanced diet. The agency will spend millions of dollars to send you into space, so the demands on your body will be high. Also, your communication skills should be well developed. You will spend several months inside the ship with the same people, so you must always be polite and stress-resistant. Various tests, puzzles, and games will help the commission assess your psyche and character. If everything goes well, you can proceed to the next stage. After that, you will run on a treadmill with sensors. Specialists want to find candidates with minimal risk of getting sick during the mission. It's not necessary to have big muscles, but it's essential to have no problems with the heart and other organs. If you start experiencing health problems while flying in outer space, you may endanger other team members. Then, a special commission selects individuals with the best results. Congratulations, you have passed, and now you're an astronaut candidate. But don't rejoice just yet, as a real challenge awaits you ahead. Within the next 2 years, you will undergo rigorous training to acquire all the necessary skills to work in space. One of these skills is public speaking. Every astronaut should be ready to speak publicly in front of a camera or a crowd. You must also learn different languages to interact with the International ISS team. No one will allow you to board a space shuttle without medical care skills, because you must be able to save people's lives in case of an emergency. However, the most enjoyable part of training is practicing in conditions that simulate weightlessness. The coolest way to experience this is through the vomit comet. You ascend to a great height inside a special aircraft, and then the pilot begins to fly in a wave-like motion, diving up and down. Inside the plane, you experience zero gravity for about 20 seconds, and this process can be repeated approximately 40 times per day. It's a fun experience, but it can cause stomach problems, and that's why this simulator is called the Vomit Comet. You will also spend a significant amount of time in another weightlessness simulator, underwater. In the special neutral buoyancy laboratory, you will dive into a massive swimming pool where astronauts simulate spacework and practice emergency procedures. Prepare yourself for heavy loads. You will have to spend up to 7 hours underwater. Before commencing the flight training program, you must become a qualified scuba diver. To achieve this, you must pass a challenging exam, which includes swimming a certain distance in a flight suit and tennis shoes. You will have the opportunity to experience the effects of high and low atmospheric pressure inside pressure chambers. You will enter a cabin where oxygen is supplied at different pressures. Also, remember all the simulators that rotate and turn you in various directions. Such training requires a high level of stress tolerance, so be prepared to control your panic and remain calm. You will also spend a significant amount of time inside life-size mock-ups of spacecraft interiors. This way, when you arrive at the ISS, everything will feel familiar. Additionally, you will practice moving objects in space using the precision air-bearing floor. In a frictionless environment, it becomes easy to transport large objects, but difficult to stop them when they are moving at high speeds. The air-bearing floor functions similarly to air hockey, releasing jets of air that assist in moving objects in the desired direction. During the training, you must determine the type of astronaut you aspire to become. There are two types, pilots and mission specialists. In the first case, you are responsible for the flight and passengers, and may even become a captain. The second profession entails performing a substantial amount of work on board and interacting with the pilot and captain. These specialists engage in scientific experiments and carry out maintenance tasks. They can be responsible for areas such as science, medicine, and engineering. To become a pilot, you will fly 15 hours a month on special NASA jet planes. Additionally, you must spend some time inside modified training aircraft called the Shuttle, which simulates landing and docking with the orbital station. Furthermore, you will need to acquire an extensive amount of knowledge. You will be required to understand space transport systems, software, and operational mechanisms of various orbiter components. This includes environmental control, propulsion systems, and much more. By the end of your training, you should have a perfect understanding of all these aspects. Each astronaut during this period is assigned a unique teacher, a single systems trainer. They will assist you in every aspect, monitor your actions, point out errors, teach you to recognize system malfunctions, and guide you in taking the correct steps to resolve them. You will begin training on the shuttle mission simulator at the final stages of your preparation. These are complex simulators that replicate real shuttles. You will learn how to properly prepare for launch and take off, maneuver the shuttle into orbit, dock with the ISS, and safely land the shuttle back on Earth. You will also acquire skills for executing complex flight maneuvers and responding appropriately to emergencies. Upon completing the training, you will be prepared to handle any challenges an astronaut may encounter. While most of these situations may not occur during your actual flights and time spent in space, you will have the confidence to handle any potential issues that may arise. Becoming an astronaut requires embarking on a lengthy and demanding journey. Unfortunately, not all stages of this path are within your control. The majority of individuals who aspire to go into outer space are eliminated during the initial stages when the selection committee evaluates each candidate. However, all the tests and challenges are worth it, because in the end, you will attain one of the most prestigious professions on Earth. You will have the opportunity to visit outer space and experience breathtaking views of our planet every day. Oh, and it's important to note that astronauts receive a substantial salary. The specific amount depends on your experience, qualifications, and mission, but even the minimum pay rate for an astronaut is above $100,000 per year.
Humanity will once again visit the Moon. The mission is planned for 2024. In this crew, we'll see the first women step on the Moon. The main goal is to establish a lunar base for continued research that will help NASA prepare for an upcoming mission to Mars. Has been planning a crewed flight to the Red Planet set for the 2030s. Robotic rovers did a good job exploring the Martian surface, but astronauts will have to dig deeper to find evidence of water and any fossils proving microscopic life was once possible on our planetary neighbor. New data on Earth-like planets. Since its launch in 2009, the Kepler Space Telescope has discovered lots of exoplanets orbiting distant stars. Some of them have an Earth-like mass, composition, and orbits. NASA plans to launch a new generation of telescopes in the 2040s. They'll help us find real twins of our planet and even get pictures of their surfaces. The return of Halley's Comet. It'll be another 41 years before we once again see the most famous comet in the sky. Halley's visits us every 75 years, so some will manage to see it twice in their lifetime. The longest solar eclipse. 166 years from now, I'll still be around then, the sun will go dark for 7 minutes and 29 seconds. This is pretty close to the predicted maximum. It'll also be the longest eclipse human civilization has ever witnessed in its 10,000 years. Arrival of the most notorious asteroid. 1950 DA was once the most probable candidate among near-Earth objects we know to actually strike the planet. Fortunately, the chance was later estimated to be not even 0.1%. It'll most likely pass by on March 16, 2880. Mark your calendars. And it'll become a solid evidence that we're safe for a while. The asteroid is more than a mile in diameter, enough to take out life on a planet. A new North Star? The Earth spins like a top. Watch one of these toys closely, and you'll see how its tip starts to draw circles in the air. The Earth's axis, an imaginary line going through the poles, goes full circle once every 26,000 years. It points at different stars along the way, thus changing the North Star. By the year 3000, the Gamma Cephei star will share this title with Polaris, as the Earth's axis will point right between them. The first near-Earth supernova. Antares is the 15th brightest star in the night skies. It's also an old red supergiant, 12 times larger than the Sun. Stars this massive age to a point where they collapse in on themselves, producing huge supernovas. For Antares, this will happen just 10,000 years from now, which is nothing for a 12-million-year-old star. The resulting burst will be too far away to affect life on this planet negatively. But the light show will be visible here on Earth even during the day. Message to the universe. Delivered. Arecibo is the encoded message describing humanity, life on Earth, and the advancement of our scientific knowledge. It was broadcast from the Arecibo radio telescope and aimed at the center of the M13 cluster, 25,000 light-years away from us. In 25,000 years, it'll finally reach its destination. A new closest star. About 36,000 years from now, the Ross 248 star will become our new closest neighbor. It'll be just 3 light-years away from us and overtake the title from Proxima Centauri, which is a bit more than 4 light-years away. Ross 248 will remain the nearest star for around 9,000 years and then move away once again. So, you didn't like the neighborhood or what? The first interstellar human-made object. In 40,000 years, Voyager 1 will reach a point within 1.5 light-years of the Gliese 445 star. It successfully reached interstellar space in 2013. But, unfortunately, it won't be able to power up any of its systems somewhere beyond the year 2025. Voyager 1 has a message too, a recording of greetings in 55 languages, music from classical to rock and roll, and sounds of the Earth's wildlife. A bare Saturn. 100,000 years from now, Saturn will lose its beautiful rings. It'll happen gradually over time as the planet's colossal gravity pulls rocks and ice from this belt floating around it. They'll all eventually fall and get crushed and burned by Saturn's atmosphere. Well, how rude. The ring system is in the middle of its life cycle, so we're incredibly lucky we got to see it in its full glory. The most frightening supernova. The WR-104 star will burst into a supernova in 3,000 years. This star is 75,000 light-years away from us, and the blast won't touch us at all. But there is a small chance it'll also produce a gamma-ray burst in the process. If this stream of energy happens to aim right at us, it will negatively affect life on Earth. Good news? Scientists say that's very unlikely. Colliding moons. The moons of Uranus are part of a highly unstable system. Some of them have orbits that cross paths. Uranus already has 2 rings of debris from past collisions of its natural satellites. Desdemona and Cressida will crash into each other in the next million years and produce new rings. A star too close for comfort. The rogue Gliese 710 star is approaching our solar system, and it will get just 1 light-year away in 1.3 million years. This won't have a major impact on the planets, but it could disturb the so-called Oort cloud, which surrounds our solar system and is full of comets. From Earth, the star will look like the brightest planets we see now, and we'll see many more comets in the skies. The closest star to ever go supernova. Within a few million years, the Spica star, which is only 240 light-years from us, will burst into a supernova. Supernovae are a problem for life when they're 3 times closer than that, but the supernova itself will shine in the Earth's skies as bright as a full moon. A time capsule for future generations. The Lagios 1 satellite was launched back in 1976 to gather information about the exact shape of the Earth and tectonic plate movement. But it also contained information about civilization on Earth at the time. It'll re-enter our atmosphere in 8.4 million years. If humanity is around then, they'll learn how life on Earth was in our time. Well, at least how it was some 40 years ago. Rings for Mars. Mars' moon, Phobos, orbits really close to the surface, and it continues to get 2 feet closer every century. 50 million years from now, it'll collide with Mars, resulting in a massive amount of debris going into orbit and forming a ring system around the red planet. Oh, can't wait for that. Days on Earth will get longer. No, really? 1.4 billion years ago, the Moon was much closer to our planet. It made the Earth rotate faster, so the day was only 18 hours. The Moon is continuously moving away from Earth. In 180 million years, we'll gain 1 extra hour. In a little over 2 billion years, a day on Earth will be 36 hours long. No more solar eclipses. 600 million years into the future, the Moon will move away from the Earth too far to cover the Sun during eclipses. Those will become ancient relics. The Sun will get too bright. It'll take about 1 billion years for the Sun to raise its luminosity by 10%. This will be devastating for planets in the solar system, and life on Earth won't be possible beyond this point. By then, our species will likely have found a new planetary home. The Sun will swallow the inner planets. In 5 billion years, the Sun will begin to evolve into a red giant, growing hundreds of times its current size. It'll swell up so much, it will eventually engulf Mercury, Venus, and possibly Earth. The new Goldilocks habitable zone may shift to the orbits of Jupiter and Saturn. This process will take a bit under 3 billion years until the Sun reaches its maximum size. After that, our star will shrink into a white dwarf. The most epic event ever. Around the same time our Sun is swelled up, the nearest neighboring galaxy, Andromeda, will come too close to the Milky Way. If we could watch our galactic neighbor at this time, it'll get larger and larger as it approaches. Then, the 2 galaxies will start to merge. Bright blue stars will burst into life. New constellations will form. The 2 spiral galaxies will now be a single giant elliptical one. Wow, I've set an alarm on my smartphone so I don't miss it.
Wow, the James Webb Telescope has been fully deployed. If you're interested in astronomy or space, you've got to be excited about the James Webb Space Telescope. Here's why. For starters, it's huge. How huge? The primary mirror of the JWST is over 21 feet wide. The Hubble Space Telescope, the previous largest eye in space, has a mirror of about 7 feet 10.5 inches. By comparison, if you place the two telescopes side by side, it'd be like putting a horse next to an elephant. And elephants are enormous. There's a perfect reason why the Webb, as it's affectionately called, is massive. It has to be huge because it's not an optical telescope in the traditional sense that most telescopes are. The JWST is an infrared telescope. It sees heat. Infrared light has a longer wavelength than visible light, so it needs a larger mirror to focus that light. So what do we have here with the James Webb Space Telescope? We have two never-before things going on. We have incredible technology and incredible science missions. Both the missions and the technology are out of this world cutting edge. The Webb is a classic example of engineering in the service of science. Because of its greater light gathering power, the James Webb Space Telescope will be able to take images of things that we were never able to see before, but have always wanted to see. Things like exoplanets, and the first galaxies in the universe, and stars and planets forming inside nebulae. And you can bet that there will be plenty of surprises too. The James Webb Space Telescope has several technological tricks up its sleeve, which promise to provide its greatest scientific discoveries. The Webb has a coronagraph, and a very special coronagraph at that. The coronagraph is the tool that will allow the first real pictures of exoplanets. The coronagraph blocks out the bright pinpoint light of stars, which we already know have planets orbiting around them. Without the coronagraph, the starlight would make things too bright to see these planets, because planets are hundreds of thousands of times dimmer than the star. But with the coronagraph blocking the starlight, the exoplanets come into view, and the JWST coronagraph can block the light from up to 100 stars at once. We can expect a swarm of exoplanets. This brings us to the next high-tech gadget the JWST has up its sleeve, a no-slit spectrograph. Usually, an ordinary spectrograph will have a slit to allow a sliver of light to enter and be diffracted. Diffraction is the scattering of light to reveal the spectrum of the light's component wavelengths. But the James Webb Space Telescope's work is so sensitive that a sliver of light would overwhelm the optics. So a no-slit spectrograph was installed. The starlight gathered from the big mirror is sent into a fiber optic cable to send only a single spot of light into the spectroscope. And that's where the grism takes over. Sir Isaac Newton used a prism to discover the spectrum of sunlight, Roy G. Biv, as you may recall. But the Webb uses a grism. That's a compound word, like smog, which is smoke and fog. A grism is a graded prism. That means it has itsy-bitsy, teeny-tiny grooves that diffract the spot of light the big mirror sends down the fiber optic cable and into the spectrograph. The science of reading a spectrum of light is called spectroscopy. By analyzing the spectra of light from the exoplanets, the JWST will determine what gases are in the planet's atmospheres, as well as their density and even their temperature. It's an incredible advance in our knowledge. We'll be able to tell if a planet has oxygen or nitrogen, or methane, and other gases that may or may not indicate that the planet is habitable. Another Earth, perhaps. Presently, the JWST is parked in its permanent location. Unlike the Hubble Space Telescope, which orbits the Earth, the James Webb Space Telescope orbits the Sun. It orbits the Sun at one of the gravitational balance points between the Earth-Sun system. It just stays there without having to use much or any fuel to hold its position. So, as the Earth orbits the Sun, the James Webb remains parked at a spot that is also orbiting the Sun. There are 5 gravitational balance points between the Earth and Sun. They are called Lagrange points, after their discoverer, Joseph Louis Lagrange, in the 18th century. The Webb is parked at L2, the second of the 5 Lagrange points, which lies 932,000 miles out into space, way beyond the Moon. All this to observe a spot of infrared light. But first, the engineers must get, or acquire, that spot of light. To get a spot of infrared light, the 18 hexagonal mirrors had to be unfolded from their position inside the Ariane rocket that sent the Webb into space. Once the mirrors have unfolded, their positions must be adjusted to microscopic level accuracy so that all 18 mirrors produce a single image. Several tiny motors are attached to each mirror segment to make these adjustments. These motors, which must be activated individually, will gradually pull the honeycomb-like mirror segments into alignment. It's a critical part of the mission and takes months to complete. To align the mirrors to produce a single spot of light, the James Webb Space Telescope can't be jiggling around. The telescope must be kept absolutely motionless, and that requires two other cutting-edge technologies, the sun shield and the cryocooler. In space, direct sunlight is very hot, and shadow is very cold. Therefore, the James Webb Space Telescope brought along its own high-tech sun shield. It's huge, too, as big as a tennis court huge, comprised of 5 individual layers of Kapton film, only a millimeter thick. Each layer of the sun shield has to be remotely deployed individually using a system of 8 motors and 139 actuators with thousands of parts. The purpose of the sun shield is to help the JWST stay cold. The colder the better. And colder is what the cryocooler is for. Temperature can be measured 3 different ways: in degrees Fahrenheit, where water freezes at 32 degrees and boils at 212; in degrees Celsius, where water freezes at 0 degrees and boils at 100 degrees. But neither of these thermometers have a starting point. So, Lord Kelvin, in the 19th century, devised a third temperature scale, the Kelvin scale, which starts at absolute 0, the coldest temperature possible. The onboard cryocooler will cool the JWST to just 7 degrees Kelvin, 7 degrees above absolute 0. At this temperature, virtually all heat from motors is removed, and the telescope will be able to focus the light to a point without any noise, basically any motion interfering with the quality of the image. Finally, after all this incredible technology functions remotely as planned, we are almost ready to observe the infrared images from the giant multi-segmented mirror of the James Webb Space Telescope. Almost ready. A telescope can collect all the light it wants, but in the end, it must also be able to detect what it's collected. If the light is not detected, it's not truly observed. Enter the pièce de résistance, the infrared detectors. The Webb has 15 of them. The specially fabricated semiconductor material produces a slight electrical charge when struck by a photon of infrared light. The Webb's infrared detectors can produce a 1 million pixel high-def image. A few of the detectors can produce a 4 million pixel image. They must be durable enough to last 10 to 20 years without warping or corrupting, all while working at 7 degrees above absolute 0. In themselves, the infrared detectors on the JWST are an engineering marvel. But what are they going to take pictures of? The missions of the JWST. Well, they're cutting edge too. 70 of the first 280 target observations are exoplanets. Is there another Earth? Which exoplanets seem habitable? The Webb telescope will provide detailed spectroscopic analysis of the atmospheres of thousands of known exoplanets. For the first time, we will see images of exoplanets as they appear in infrared light. Cosmology, the study of the universe, is perhaps the primary mission for the Webb. Galaxies receding away so fast that their light is stretched into the infrared will be a prime target for observation. Hundreds of hours of observations are necessary to collect the faint infrared light from these first galaxies formed after the Big Bang. The JWST will give us a picture of what the infant universe looked like. Astronomers will learn new information about the dark energy that is driving the expansion of the universe and what role, if any, black holes play in the formation of galaxies. Star formation in the Milky Way and nearby galaxies is also part of the mission of the James Webb. By imaging hundreds of solar systems forming around newborn stars, astronomers will establish a definite history of solar system development. Now fact will replace theory, and a big step forward will be taken in our understanding of space. The James Webb Space Telescope is a bold endeavor that will mark an epoch time in scientific history. All the planets of the solar system are slowly lining up. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune are about to form a straight line. This event, called the Parade of Planets, occurs once every 176 years. The last time this happened was almost 40 years ago, and it was a great chance to explore all these planets in one go. On August 20th, 1977, thousands of people gathered outside NASA's Kennedy Space Center. They came to witness the launch of the most ambitious and distant space mission in history. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition! Launch rocket Titan took off from Earth and left the atmosphere. As soon as the rocket reached outer space, it launched the probe Voyager 2, which began its journey. The probe consisted of a bus 1.5 feet in height and almost 6 feet wide. On top of it, there was a round 12-foot wide antenna. Most of the scientific equipment was mounted on a boom that extended 8 feet outward. On September 5, 1977, Voyager 1, the identical space probe, left our home planet. It sent us pictures of Earth and the Moon. It soon overtook Voyager 2, launched 2 weeks earlier. That's why the second probe has the number 1 in its name. And so the journey through dark space began. March 5, 1979. About 4 Earth-Sun distances away from our planet, Voyager 1 came close to Jupiter and prepared its scientific equipment to explore the planet. The probe had a dozen gadgets, including a 2-camera system with narrow and wide-angle lenses. So, it could take full-length photos of the planet with the wide-angle camera, as well as close-up photos of specific places on the planet and its satellites. The probe also had a radio science system to determine the atmospheric composition, weight, and gravitational fields of the planets it came across. Infrared and ultraviolet spectrometers could help measure radiation and temperature invisible to the human eye. Various sensors were used to examine cosmic rays. Voyager 1 was the first to find volcanoes outside Earth. Those were on Jupiter's satellite, Io. It has dozens of active volcanoes that constantly spew lava. Then the probe pointed its cameras at the Great Red Spot. That's how people learned that it was a giant cyclone-like storm that hasn't stopped for the entire history of observations of Jupiter. It was also the first time when lightning was detected outside of our home planet. And in the invisible spectrum, Voyager 1 noticed that Io acted like an electrical generator for Jupiter. Ions, which are charged particles, were constantly flying toward the gas giant. This electrical current was 5 million amps. Soon, Voyager 1 continued its journey. 5 months later, Voyager 2 approached Jupiter too. This gas giant has rings around it. They're not like Saturn's though. Jupiter's rings consist mostly of dust. When the planet's rocky satellites collided, they turned into small debris. Gradually, this debris turned into fine dust. Then Voyager 2 approached Europa. This moon is completely covered by a crust of ice, and beneath it, there may be a liquid ocean where life can possibly exist. Voyager 2 was the first to capture the cracks in Europa's ice crust. While flying near Io, Voyager 2 discovered that 6 volcanoes on its surface were still erupting. This meant that the periods of activity of these volcanoes could last for months. Both space probes circled the gas giant several times and then dashed further into space. Such a gravitational maneuver allowed them to gain more speed and saved fuel for the trip. By November 9th, 1980, Voyager 1 had already traveled 8 Earth-Sun distances away from home. The space probe arrived at Saturn. It discovered 3 new satellites of the gas giant: Atlas, Prometheus, and Pandora. This proved the theory that these were the moons that kept the planet's rings in line. It also turned out that unlike Jupiter's, Saturn's rings also contained ice. Voyager 1 took a peek at Titan, Saturn's largest satellite. It's 50% larger than the Moon and even has an atmosphere. It's the only place in the solar system besides Earth where liquid water has been proven to exist. That's why scientists don't deny the possibility of life there. Then it was time for another gravity maneuver. Voyager 1 once again darted away from the planet's orbit. This time, it was aiming upward relative to the line of the parade of planets. Almost a year later, Voyager 2 arrived there. It made a flyby of several of Saturn's icy satellites. Supposedly, a long time ago, these moons collided and knocked huge chunks of ice and rock out of each other. This debris orbited Saturn, collided, and slowly crumbled into dust, consisting of ice and rock. This is how the famous rings of Saturn were born. Another gravity maneuver, and Voyager 2 set off for the next gas giant. 5 years later, it arrived at its destination, 17 Earth-Sun distances away from our planet. For the first time ever, a human-made object approached Uranus. Voyager 2 discovered 11 new moons there. The probe also found that Uranus was the coldest planet in the solar system. Its temperature is negative 350 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 4 times colder than the temperature at the South Pole. At that time, the Deep Space Network was being tested on Earth for the first time. It's a network of radio telescopes all over the planet. They aim at certain points in the sky to establish communication with extremely distant objects. These telescopes have been successfully receiving signals from Voyagers 1 and 2. August 25, 1989. Voyager 2 had already traveled 23 Earth-Sun distances and arrived at Neptune. It was the first time people received images of this blue planet from such a close distance. The probe discovered 6 new moons there and also took the first pictures of the planet's rings. Engineers then turned off the probe's cameras to save power for its main computer and the instruments that measured the solar and interstellar wind. Voyager 2 left Neptune and headed into deep space. That's why it no longer needed the cameras. A few months later, Voyager 1 sent its last photo back to Earth. It was a family portrait of our entire solar system. Every pale dot was a planet. You can barely recognize Earth in the picture. After that, the camera was turned off to save power. This was the start of the interstellar mission for Voyager 1. For 15 years, Voyager 1 had been flying to the edge of the solar system. On December 16, 2004, the probe passed through the termination shock. This is where the solar wind suddenly slows down and heats up after colliding with the interstellar wind. The space probe managed to endure this test and continued its journey. In 2007, Voyager 2 crossed the same boundary. At that point, sensors recorded a temperature of about 266 degrees Fahrenheit, but the probe managed to withstand it and continued its journey through the dark cosmos. Both Voyagers moved through interstellar space in different directions. They discovered that the heliosphere, the solar wind bubble, is not perfectly round, but more like an egg. August 25, 2012. Voyager 1 became the first human-made object to enter interstellar space. It's now also the most distant artificial object in human history. On November 5, 2018, Voyager 2 also left the solar system. The 2 probes continued their journey into deep space. Right now, the Voyagers have been operational for 44 years. Voyager 1 has traveled 153 Earth-Sun distances and is moving forward at 38,000 miles per hour. In about 300 years, the probes will reach the Oort cloud. This is a hypothetical region around the solar system with nothing but asteroids and blocks of ice. Scientists believe they might reach the nearest stars in the next 40,000 years. Perhaps one day, the Voyagers will enter these star systems and explore unknown worlds. There may be planets there that look like ours. The probes may even be able to find an intelligent civilization there. For this purpose, each Voyager carries a golden record with a message on it. There are 115 images. Among them, there's our number systems, a map of the solar system and pictures of its planets, diagrams of human DNA, portraits of people, and landscapes from Earth. There's also greetings in 55 of Earth's languages, including the oldest and newest of them. There are also 90 minutes of music from every corner of our planet. The Voyagers also carry a device to play these sounds. If another civilization gets this record, their scientists could decode the data step by step. And then, that civilization may decide to pay us a friendly visit. They'll have to repeat the heroic journey of the Voyagers, though. Dozens of light years through dark space. Then crossing the border of the solar system, and finally flying past Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, and the asteroid belt toward the little blue planet. We can only hope that people will be advanced enough to welcome them.
Time can stretch or shrink depending on where you are. Climb to the top of an extremely high mountain, and time will pass a teeny tiny bit faster than if you were down in a valley. That's all because of gravity and how it affects time. We hardly notice it in our everyday life, but for scientists and space agencies preparing to send people to the moon, these minuscule differences in time really do matter. We'll get to answer the why question a bit later. Right now, a new space race is underway. Many countries want to establish long-term bases on the moon. With humans up there, things like reliable timekeeping become crucial. The thing is, the moon doesn't operate on Earth's time. A day on the Moon runs slightly faster than a day on Earth. The difference is about 56 microseconds, and it seems insignificant. But over time, even such a difference can add up, creating bigger issues. So, to keep lunar missions running smoothly and prevent things from drifting out of sync, NASA and scientists around the world are now dealing with a tricky challenge: creating an entirely new lunar timescale. NASA is supposed to start using it by 2026. It's the same year they hope to send astronauts back to the Moon for the first time in 50 years. But this new timescale is not just a Moon time zone. It's actually an entire system that will adjust for the Moon's faster time and keep everything synchronized with Earth's time systems. Only in this case will missions be able to run smoothly. You see, on Earth our timekeeping is already surprisingly complicated. It might seem like time should be a straightforward concept, but keeping accurate time is actually a precise science, especially when you consider how much timekeeping affects our daily lives. So, to keep global time coordinated, scientists rely on something called Coordinated Universal Time, also known as UTC. This global time standard is based on ultra-precise atomic clocks that scientists place in separate locations all over the world. Atomic clocks are cool because they measure time based on the consistent vibrations of atoms, so they're super stable and accurate. This helps scientists make sure UTC is the same for everyone everywhere. These atomic clocks also take into account that time moves slightly more slowly the closer you are to the center of our planet. So, atomic clocks positioned closer to the Earth's surface tick a bit more slowly due to stronger gravitational pull. This effect, explained by Einstein's theory of relativity, happens because gravity affects time. By spreading atomic clocks across different elevations, scientists average out all the tiny time differences caused by gravity. Also, for precise timekeeping, scientists occasionally add leap seconds to account for the small natural changes in Earth's rotation speed. It sounds pretty technical, but this process of keeping everyone on the same time helps make the modern world function. After all, precise timing is crucial for global trading, GPS navigation, and even internet communications. But time on the Moon works differently. Our natural satellite has a weaker gravitational field than Earth. That's why clocks on the Moon tick a bit faster. This difference means that lunar clocks are very likely to slowly drift away from Earth clocks if there's no correction. It can lead to big problems when astronauts need to keep in close contact with Earth or navigate around the lunar surface. NASA's solution is something called a lunar timescale. Scientists aren't going to adjust Moon clocks to match Earth exactly. Instead, they want to establish a unique system that measures lunar time accurately, but is also easy to convert back to Earth time. Think of it as creating a whole new framework just for the Moon. To make this lunar time system work, NASA is cooperating with international colleagues like the European Space Agency. Together, they're setting up what they call LunaNet. This lunar network will be a bit like the Internet for the Moon. It'll make sure all the lunar clocks work together and align with Earth-based time. Just like how atomic clocks around the world coordinate for UTC on Earth, clocks on the Moon will be part of this larger LunaNet network. Now, scientists are pretty experienced when it comes to managing time in space. Global Positioning System satellites, which orbit Earth about 12,550 miles high, have atomic clocks on board. These clocks tick faster than clocks on the Earth's surface because they're quite far away from Earth's gravitational pull. But then, how does GPS navigation stay accurate? It's because scientists have figured out ways to slow those clocks down to match Earth's time. This experience with GPS clocks is a great base for what scientists need to do on the Moon. In some ways, it might be even easier than managing GPS. Scientists can work with lunar clocks as they naturally are, instead of needing to adjust them to sync perfectly with Earth. By setting up accurate lunar time from the start, scientists hope to avoid some of the complications of managing GPS satellites. And now, here's the interesting part, or maybe more interesting. To keep lunar timekeeping a reality, NASA and its partners want to set up clocks both on the lunar surface and on satellites orbiting the Moon. Some of these clocks will be long-lasting atomic clocks, and others will be crystal oscillators. Those offer stability over short time periods. Together, these clocks will create a network that scientists will be able to rely on. Meanwhile, atomic clocks for space don't come cheap. They can cost a staggering few $1,000,000 each. Luckily, crystal oscillators are more affordable, but they don't stay accurate over long periods. Once those clocks are set up, they'll work together as part of LunaNet, which will be NASA's framework for everything related to moon-based time and data networks. LunaNet will act like an internet for lunar operations. Different space agencies will contribute to it, like how internet service providers work for us on Earth. But there's another set of challenges, and it's connected with the moon's rotation. Firstly, a day on the moon lasts much longer than a day on our planet because it takes the moon about 28 Earth days to make a full rotation. Plus, the moon's equator experiences about 14 days of sunlight, followed by 14 days of darkness, unlike Earth's regular day-night cycle. And at the moon's south pole, where NASA is going to establish future lunar missions, there are areas that stay lit or in shadow permanently. It might make it harder for astronauts to keep track of time. NASA and its partners hope to involve more countries in this possible on board with the lunar timescale, so that everyone exploring the moon is on the same page. Now, another really exciting thing about all this is that figuring out lunar time could help other future space missions, like trips to Mars. The experience and knowledge we'll get from setting up a lunar timescale are likely to serve as a blueprint for managing time on even farther planets. That's one of the reasons why scientists are taking this lunar project so seriously. As for astronauts living on the moon, a consistent, reliable time system will be essential, not just for navigation, but for everything from scientific experiments to day-to-day activities. NASA's Lunar Time Project is truly groundbreaking. It's the first step toward managing time as humans expand farther into space. And if they get it right, it'll mean that future astronauts won't just have Earth time to guide them. They'll also have a moon time, and even, one day, a Mars time too. Precise timekeeping matters both for the sake of scientifically understanding the passage of time on the moon and for setting up all the infrastructure necessary to carry out missions. Scientists are also eager to create a timescale from scratch because they can take everything they've learned about timekeeping on Earth and apply it to a new system on the moon. Well, I'm out of time, so bye! A huge asteroid, several hundred feet across, is dashing towards Earth through the black nothingness of the cosmos. Ooh. Brace for the terrible news. There's a 72% chance it might hit Earth in 14 years, with potential impact zones being North America, Southern Europe, and North Africa, some of the most densely populated areas on the planet. Astronomers have been keeping a close eye on the space invader for a few months, but now it's moved too close to the Sun, and tracking it is impossible for the next 7 months. Of course, there's a 28% chance that it will miss our planet altogether. But what if it doesn't? Global devastation and destruction, that's what. Thousands of lives lost, billions and billions of dollars in damage, entire species wiped off the face of the Earth, ruined cities and towns, destroyed fields and forests. We're left wondering whether it's the future awaiting for us. Well, now you can breathe easy. That's just a hypothetical scenario created by NASA to prepare for a situation like this. The space agency has been thinking about this kind of disaster for years. Even cooler, they run what-if asteroid exercises every 2 years to get scientists, state agencies, and international experts on the same page. The last one occurred in April. Over 100 people took part in that event. During such asteroid drills, experts pretend that a giant space rock is heading our way. Then they work through all the tricky questions they can come up with, like how big is it? Where might it hit? What should we do? It's like a massive brainstorming session to make sure that if it ever happens, we won't have to start from scratch. To make these scenarios feel as real as possible, NASA's Center for Near-Earth Object Studies gets involved. These are folks who track real asteroids and calculate their orbits. So they simulate months of asteroid observations, complete with uncertainties about its size, trajectory, and potential impact zones. It's the kind of uncertainty that makes decision-making way harder, just like it would be in real life. Now, if an astronaut really was aiming at Earth, it wouldn't be just one country's problem. It would be everyone's. That's why this exercise brings in international experts. In April, it happened for the first time. They worked alongside U.S. agencies like NASA's Planetary Defense Coordination Office and FEMA to understand how the world might respond to such a crisis, since an asteroid impact would have dire consequences globally. Now, the big question is, can we actually stop an asteroid from hitting Earth? Here, there are two main options experts consider. First, we could send a spacecraft to gather more info. If we knew more about the asteroid's size, mass, and orbit, we'd be able to make better decisions about what to do next. The second option is to try to deflect it. Basically, it means bumping the asteroid off its course so that it misses Earth. This might sound impossible, but NASA's DART mission has already proven that we can do it. 2 years ago, they crashed a spacecraft into a small asteroid called Dimorphos and successfully changed its orbit. It was a huge victory for planetary defense. But missions like that take tons of time to plan, prepare, and carry out. That's why spotting dangerous asteroids as early as possible is so important. Currently, NASA is working on a new telescope called NEO-Surveyor, which is set to launch in 2027. Unlike good old telescopes, NEO-Surveyor is designed to detect even the trickiest asteroids, including ones orbiting close to the Sun. It'll give us a better chance to act early and potentially stop an asteroid before it becomes a threat. If you still think that an asteroid impact is something out of science fiction and the threat isn't real, how about this? Early on Sunday, January 21st, a small asteroid about 3 feet wide entered Earth's atmosphere and luckily burned up over Germany. NASA's Scout Impact System spotted it 95 minutes before it hit and predicted exactly when and where it would arrive. At 1:32 a.m. local time, the asteroid turned into a blazing bright fireball, visible as far away as the Czech Republic. Some small meteorites might have landed near the impact site, about 37 miles west of Berlin. This is just the 8th time ever that an asteroid has been detected before it hit Earth. It's a splendid example of how tools like Scout are helping us track asteroids and prepare for anything bigger that might come our way. Here's another example. A small asteroid turned the skies over northeastern Siberia into a breathtaking light show on December the 4th, burning up harmlessly in Earth's atmosphere. The space rock, about 28 inches across, was spotted just hours before it hit. Thanks to observations from astronomers around the world, a special alert system managed to predict the impact to plus or minus 10 seconds. The asteroid entered Earth's atmosphere at 1:15 a.m. local time. The authorities were put on alert, but there was no damage reports. NASA's Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, or ATLAS, spotted the rock 12 hours before it entered the atmosphere. This makes it the 4th imminent impactor, which is an asteroid discovered within hours of its expected impact, detected this year, and the 11th overall. Now, China also has big plans for planetary defense. They're working on their first mission to hit an asteroid, and it's got a double purpose. One spacecraft will crash into the asteroid, and the other will hang back to study the whole thing for up to a year. In other words, it's not just about protecting Earth, it's also a way to learn more about the solar system. The target is an asteroid called 2050. They're hoping to learn more about its structure and composition, which could help us with future planetary defense missions. Then they plan to hit the asteroid with another spacecraft to test the impact, and the first space probe will stay there to observe the remains for up to a year. Timing is critical for this mission, and the asteroid offers some good opportunities in the next few years. Thus, in March and May of 2027, the asteroid will pass within 20 million miles of Earth. In April 2028, it'll get even closer. By that I mean 13 million miles away. A year later, in April 2029, the asteroid will end up just 4.2 million miles away, making it the best shot for a mission. Another decent chance will be April 2030. That's when the asteroid will pass our planet at 4.4 million miles. To give you some context, NASA's DART mission once targeted an asteroid 7 million miles away, and the trip took 10 months. So China's planners have to pick the right moment, depending on how long their spacecraft will need to get there. The mission is expected to start around 2027. At the same time, this won't be China's first attempt to target an asteroid. Back in 2023, they were planning a planetary defense test with a different asteroid, which is also about 100 feet wide. It's not clear why they switched to the current one. probably because the timing works better. Most asteroids are basically time capsules from 4.6 billion years ago, leftovers from when the solar system was just forming. Studying them could tell us a lot about how planets, including Earth, came to be. So, China's taking on something that combines planetary defense and pure space science. They're definitely making big moves in the space exploration game. August 23, 2023, a day when India's Chandrayaan-3 spacecraft made history by becoming the first to touch down on the lunar South Pole, a place we can't normally see from Earth. What makes this lunar hideaway so fascinating to scientists? Well, it turns out it's hiding something precious: lunar ice. This place is believed to be more abundant with this ice than what we found up north. And it's not hard to see why scientists are so buzzed up about it. It's a frozen water source, and it could become our key to building a permanent lunar home, or even fueling missions all the way to Mars. Scientists knew about this ice for over 2 decades, since the NASA spacecraft accidentally stumbled upon it during one of the missions. Then in 2018, NASA triumphantly declared that they're 100% sure about it. They said that the south pole of the moon is abundant with water. Now, picture this. Future lunar settlers could tap into this water supply. It could help us sustain life in the barren lunar landscape. Plus, by cleverly splitting the water into oxygen and hydrogen, we could receive both air and rocket fuel. All this will make moon missions more feasible and self-sustaining. It's also a great glimpse into the past. This ice, maybe as old as the moon itself, could unlock the moon's and Earth's deep mysteries. But it turns out that water isn't rare in space at all. There might be lots of planets out there where life could thrive. We know this because we started finding water vapor around stars, and this water is remarkably similar to the water in our own solar system. This discovery suggests that the water on Earth originally came from space. Water forms around stars in the cloud of extremely hot vapor. Then it turns into ice and sticks to tiny dust particles. These particles stick together over time and become bigger objects, like comets, planets, and other things. Some of these become comets and planets in our own solar system. And this is how water is being spread across the universe, and it may be how it got to our planet and the moon too. Scientists think that the lunar ice might have journeyed here eons ago. Maybe it hitched a ride on water-rich asteroids that smacked into the moon's surface. All this has big implications for us. The southern pole is an ideal canvas for humanity to establish a real moon base. Imagine brick domes connected by secret underground tunnels. They'll be bustling with people busily operating computers. Some others will be cruising the lunar landscape in their jeeps or on their way to mine precious resources. We have some pretty cool ideas on how to build this. First, you probably imagine hauling hefty and water-draining shelters all the way from Earth. But maybe there's a more effective way. Think about our history as a civilization. Every time we ventured to a new place, we surveyed the surroundings for available resources and used them to survive and thrive. This is how we spread across our own planet. So why shouldn't we spread across the moon the same way? Now, you might wonder what resources the moon might offer. We know about the ice, and it can be turned into water. But we can clearly see that our planet lacks lush greenery and edible food. Well, it might not be obvious, but the moon does have something to offer: mineral resources and sunlight. Unlike Earth, where the sun rises and sets, the lunar poles offer quite a beautiful sight. The sun gracefully orbits the horizon the entire day, which means it can provide an almost uninterrupted source of power. Imagine living in a world bathed in perpetual sunlight. I'm sure the solar panels will love it. Me? Not so much. Still, we could use not only the sun's light, but also its heat. Honestly, we should just use everything. If we're left with spare metal while producing oxygen, find a purpose for that metal too. We need to treat the environment responsibly, not only on Earth, but on the moon as well. which is why scientists are learning how to turn the moon's most abundant resources, regolith, into sturdy bricks. They've been quite inventive in figuring out how to create moon bricks. Scientists want to use the sun's heat to melt lunar dust, layer by layer, essentially creating a 3D printer for moon dust. Engineers have also cooked up bricks using solar ovens and zapped lunar soil with microwaves. They become quite adept at it. So yeah, perhaps we're going to establish a little brick factory on the moon and build regolith houses. It's like Minecraft in real life. As soon as you find some cool new material, you gotta build a tiny house with it. If successful, these bricks could be used to construct entire buildings, potentially covering inflatable modules or giving new life to abandoned landers. So, will astronauts need to become skilled bricklayers? Well, they won't do everything themselves. We'd have to create a small automated system involving robots working collaboratively. Humans will, of course, oversee the construction site. Despite all this automation, scientists believe that living on the moon is going to be, well, call it cozy. The designs may involve stacked living quarters or multi-purpose areas. However, there would be some challenges too. On the moon, things get extreme. Imagine scorching temperatures that can go up to 212 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, and at night, they plunge down to a chilly minus 290 degrees. And it's not just the weather. The moon gets relentlessly exposed to solar radiation, cosmic rays, and micrometeorite impacts. All these things gradually wear down anything on its surface. Another big challenge is the lunar dust. On the moon, there's no air to breathe, and the dust there can cause problems. And this one isn't only regular dust. It's super clingy and can even make astronauts sneeze and have watery eyes, as if they're having a lunar hay fever. It can also damage equipment and spacesuits. It's not something you want to mess with. Scientists have found that the dust is made when meteors hit the moon, creating tiny particles and sharp glass shards. It's toxic, and its tiny particles can float around in low lunar gravity, making it hard to breathe. Unlike on Earth, the moon doesn't have wind or rain to clean it away. So now they're studying it to find out how to prevent this annoying problem from ruining their entire mission. There's more to this lunar haven than meets the eye. Scientists also want to delve into the mysteries of low-frequency electromagnetic waves there. These waves are whispers from the far reaches of the universe. These elusive signals have remained hidden from us for ages. We only caught some cacophony of radio and other background noise, but that's it. On the moon's dark side, however, we can finally record and study them. Studying these waves will help scientists to unlock the secrets of the universe's origins. It's not just about the Earth or the moon. We're talking about peering back to the very beginnings of our world. Our new lunar lab might help us to forever reshape our understanding of the cosmos. So, NASA has some big plans on the moon now. Their Artemis mission completed a successful return to Earth in December 2022 after nearly a month in space. It ventured far beyond the moon. This mission proved the capabilities of some of our recent technological developments that will help us explore Mars. The goal of Artemis is to establish a lasting presence on the moon. They want to create a gateway, like a space station in orbit around the satellite, to help with the landings. Artemis 2 is set to carry astronauts to lunar orbit in 2024, and during Artemis 3, which should take place in the mid-2020s, 2 astronauts will touch down near the moon's south pole. It's quite possible that the lunar base will be built within the next couple of decades. So, stay tuned.
Let's say a spacecraft runs out of power far in deep space. It wouldn't fall in the traditional sense because there's no gravity. Newton once said that an object remains in motion unless acted upon by an external force. In our case, this external force is gravity. In other words, if there's nothing with gravity around, it would continue to move due to inertia. It would keep going the way it did. without us being able to change its trajectory or adjust it in any way. It would keep traveling through deep space, almost forever. Well, at least until radiation and cosmic rays destroy it. And unless some celestial body like an asteroid doesn't destroy it either. And of course, unless it encounters something with a gravitational pull, like a planet or a star. The likelihood of all this depends on the location and trajectory of the spacecraft. Voyager 1 was launched by NASA in 1977. It's been on its journey for almost 50 years now. Right now, it's the farthest human-made object from Earth, more than 50 billion miles away. It's already very far from all our planets, and it's the first spacecraft to enter interstellar space, the vast, empty space that exists between stars in a galaxy. It's the space outside our solar system, where there are no planets, moons, or other objects associated with our Sun. However, it's still in our solar system. To leave it, Voyager 1 needs to bypass the Oort cloud, a big, icy collection of objects where all the comets in our solar system probably come from. It will take Voyager about 300 years to reach the inner edge of the cloud, and then about 30,000 years to bypass it. Voyager 1 has a special plate on board, like a message in a bottle. This plate is called the Golden Record. It's not really golden, it's actually a shiny gold color. On this plate, there are things that tell a story about Earth. It was created in case Voyager ever encounters any extraterrestrial beings. The record has greetings in different languages, music from Earth, and even the sounds of nature, like birds chirping and the wind blowing. As the distance between us increases, the signal strength from Voyager 1 weakens over time. Eventually, it may become too weak to be detected by our communication equipment. The power output of Voyager 1 interstellar space. However, it will also cease to function eventually, becoming a silent artifact drifting through the Milky Way. When there's something with gravity near the spacecraft, the inevitable happens. It falls onto that object. This is why out of the vast South Pacific Ocean beyond New Zealand lies a unique and intriguing place known as the Spacecraft Cemetery. Officially, it's called the South Pacific Ocean Uninhabited Area. It's located near Point Nemo, the most remote spot from any island. It serves as the final resting place for spacecraft that have completed their missions and reached their lifetime limit due to wear and tear. Sometimes, these larger spacecraft are too hefty to burn up during re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. In that case, they're directed to crash or splash down in this remote ocean location. This helps protect us from any potential harm during re-entry and impact. There are, however, some big problems with this place. Scientists are worried about the impact this spacecraft cemetery has on the ocean. When spaceships come back to Earth, they often spill chemicals. One of these chemicals is hydrazine, a dangerous rocket substance. Unfortunately, it might not completely burn up during re-entry, so it leaks out into the ocean, posing a threat not only to marine life, but to us as well. We made up some rules, both within countries and internationally, to stop this. However, it's not easy to figure out how risky it is for certain spacecraft to enter the cemetery. We can't say for sure how much of a substance is left after it enters the air. As for spacecraft that don't fall, they're often left in space as debris. This is what we call any man-made object orbiting Earth that's no longer useful. It's also very dangerous. There are over 27,000 pieces of space debris orbiting Earth at high speeds. All this puts human and robot missions at risk and harms spacecraft. As we mentioned, usually we get rid of space debris by trying to bring the crafts back to Earth. This makes them burn up when they re-enter due to high speeds and air pressure. This usually works with smaller objects. There are also riskier methods, like letting spacecraft break down themselves, or crash into other things, or blow up. These methods aren't great because they just make up even more debris, even if it's smaller. So now, scientists are trying to find new ways to get rid of retired spacecraft. For example, nets and magnetic arms. There's also a thing called reusable spacecraft. It's a space vehicle that's built to be used more than once. For example, space planes such as the Space Shuttle and the Dream Chaser, or capsules like the SpaceX Dragon. They're designed to launch, orbit, come back to Earth, and do it all over again. But it's important to make sure these spacecraft and their passengers or cargo stay safe during the return, which is quite hard to do. Reusable spacecraft have special systems to guide them back to Earth safely. The Space Shuttle, for example, had OMS pods, sort of special backpacks that help the spacecraft move and control its position in space. The SpaceX Dragon had its own engines to slow down and enter the atmosphere in a controlled way. They also have a heat shield to protect it during re-entry. The heat shield can be made of different materials, but they need to be tough and able to withstand multiple trips. Coming up with a heat shield that's both strong and lightweight is a bit of a challenge. Finally, if a spacecraft lands on a runway, it needs wings and landing gear. They also add weight. Some designs like lifting bodies or the delta wing of the Space Shuttle try to reduce the mass of these parts. After landing, the spacecraft might need some fixing up before it can go on its next adventure. This process can take a while, up to a year, and it might not always be possible to use the spacecraft again if it's been fixed up. There's also a limit to how many times a spacecraft can be fixed and used again before it has to retire. Different spacecraft have different abilities to be reused. Finally, sometimes we can rescue a spacecraft or even remake and repurpose it. Voyager 2 is one of the examples. It had a little trouble with its radio in 1978. Engineers fixed it by using a backup system. Since then, it's been exploring our solar system for over 40 years. The Hubble Space Telescope is the most famous telescope we have, the grandfather of them all. However, it had a blurry start in 1990. The work wasn't done at all as expected. The pictures were of low resolution. Luckily, astronauts fixed it right in space in 1993. To do that, they used some corrective mirrors. Now it gives us fantastic views of the universe. As you can see, even in bad scenarios,